Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Project Camelot channel and network. I'm Mark Gray, live from Normandy, France, and I'm hosting today a new guest that hasn't been around much, not at all, even in France and in the U.S. He's had quite a few interviews online. This is Wayne Bush, live from Texas. Hi, Wayne. How are you?
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Good, good, good. He's hosting. He's been hosting since 2004, I believe, if I can recall it right. A magnificent website, very detailed and complete regarding the false light phenomenon, afterlife, and how souls are being programmed to go to the moon, the sun at death, and are recycled as energy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to summarize it. There's a lot more to it and more in depth than that, and I'm not positive about the role of the moon and sun that they, are definitely part of the system. But that's the theory I've been working with, and there is some corroborating evidence that suggests that might be
Uh, So Wayne, can you tell us a bit about yourself, your research, your website, trickbythelight.com?
Yeah, well, I made my living for many years as a computer programmer, and I retired from the rat race almost a year ago now, so I have more time to devote to my research on the game of life, which I've been researching for over 20 years now. I started the website Trick by the Light, I think sometime around 2004, as you mentioned. It was an effort to investigate the popular meme that one goes to the light at death. I mean, we hear it all the time in Hollywood movies and from psychic mediums, but what really happens when we go to the light? I once heard UFO researcher John Lear in an Art Bell interview say that the light is a trick and one should not go to the light. So I've been studying that aspect for the last 20 years or so, as well as cross-referencing it with out-of-body experiences, pre-birth experiences, psychedelic experiences, meditation experiences, alien abductions, ancient historic texts, religion and science, basically anything that gets stored as memory and factors into our decision making. So I'm going to be quoting a lot of different sources, so it's just not me saying I believe this and I believe that. Although in the end it's still just a belief, it is based on supporting evidence. And I hope to show that experts in all the relevant major fields of research are saying similar things.
Right, exactly. Supporting evidence that's very crucial. Can you give us an overview of your website?
Yeah, sure. My website posits that life ultimately is a cosmic game or play, a divine drama that we dream. Thus, it's a simulation or illusory in nature. We have chosen to play a role or character in a movie or play like a reality TV show, the True Man Show. The plot of this story or drama is very similar to that of many popular Hollywood movies. A villain and its henchmen have imprisoned the planet and are feeding off its inhabitants who need saving. The prison planet in this case is Earth. It's happened since humans, and the villain is an extraterrestrial or interdimensional entity who has most commonly been referred to as the devil, Satan, who we will see as the Lord of this earth and most worship as God. To avoid confusion with the true God, I refer to this false God as the demiurge, a term Gnostic. They called his minions Archons, which is a Greek term which means ruler. This is because we have given away our sovereign power through consent and have allowed them to rule over us. They have been able to do this by imprisoning our souls in the physical body and keeping our consciousness at a superficially low level by bonding it to earth. Any screenwriter in Hollywood knows that every good story must have drama, most notably conflict. Part of this climax of the story is getting mankind to wake up from this lower frequency of consciousness or dream state in which we have fallen and remember and claim our true origin.
So you're talking about a game of life. Can you describe this game of life? What is it to you?
Well, I believe we're all eternal spirits, and while in the spirit world, we're able to manifest anything we want instantly. I would imagine that might get a little boring after a while, so we invent games to play where we limit our abilities and create challenges for us to overcome. Think of life here like a mystery novel, a puzzle that we have to solve, a form of entertainment like a reality TV show or a game that we choose to play. Some reality TV shows are competitions or games. Here are a few quotes from near-death experiencers that came back with a distinct impression that life on Earth is a game or some form of entertainment. That really shouldn't come as a surprise if you apply the Hermetic principle of as above, so below, or the notion that we were created in God's image. Entertainment and sports are such huge industries here. David J. said, I asked him what the meaning of life is. He told me for the entertainment of the spirit realm. Nancy D. said, is my understanding that what transpired during my NDE is the real reality. Life as a human is more like a dream, role in a play, virtual reality game, character in a drama, etc. So these words fall far short of actual explanation. Myra S. said, I realized that the real goal of the mind-created life game in life was to remove the veil of delusion and ignorance and reach the ultimate truth of one's reality in life itself. End quote. I just watched a documentary recently on salvia, a psychoactive plant. The person tried it a few times and came to the startling conclusion. He said, have you ever seen that episode of South Park where they found out that Earth was a reality TV show and that extraterrestrials were watching it across the universe? This is basically how my trip was. By the way, I never even saw that episode until recently, end quote. I even received an email from Lars in Germany who told me about a pre-birth experience or memory he has. He said, I know I was in some place prior to birth. Like I went to some sort of school, got educated, learned things about this earth people would only find out in time, okay? And some voice, a calm, gentle voice, but still authority-like, told me just before I was born, what do you want to be? I said, a hero. I want to help them. The voice said, fine, then a hero you will be. However, remember they are very resistant. They don't know better, and you will face a lot of resistance. I said, I know. Then I came to Earth, end quote.
So basically, is consciousness a dream, or are we dreaming a conscious reality according to you?
I think consciousness is a continuum of frequencies and can be seen as we get sleepy or groggy and think less clearly. It's like a movie projector that projects images or imagining. It's like a tuner as it has the ability to tune in different frequencies. When we sleep, we have dreams that can seem real. And Edgar Allan Poe wrote, is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? Given the continuum of frequency and consciousness, there could be dreams within dreams within dreams, like in the movie Inception. There is the phenomenon of lucid dreaming, where one becomes aware during the dream that it's a dream and can take control of the dream. Of course, Shakespeare wrote, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. In his classic book, Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda wrote, you have come to Earth to entertain and be entertained. He also wrote the entire universe as God's cosmic motion picture, and that individuals are merely actors in the divine play who change roles throughout reincarnation. Mankind's deep suffering is rooted in identifying too closely with one's current role rather than with the movie director or God, end quote. A psychedelic researcher, Stanislav Grof, whose research is based on between 4,000 to 6,000 cases, wrote a book called The Cosmic Game. Even Timothy Leary wrote a book called The Game of Life. And Grof wrote, quote, since the divine play, the cosmic drama, is unimaginable without individual protagonists, without distinct separate entities, the existence of evil is absolutely essential for the creation of the world as we know it. This understanding is in basic agreement with the notion found in some Christian mystical scriptures, according to which the fallen angel Lucifer, as a representative of polarity, is seen as a demiurgic figure. He takes humanity on a fantastic journey into the world of matter. Approaching this problem from another perspective, we can say that, in the last analysis, evil and suffering are based on the false perception of reality, particularly the belief of sentient beings in their separate individual self. Grof also wrote, the insights into the nature and dynamics of the cosmic game do not have to emerge on the level of the same creative principle. Gail, a minister who participated in our training program for professionals, had in her psychedelic session an interesting sequence that portrayed cosmogony as a competitive creative game of 4 demiurgic superhuman entities. Although her experience is very unusual, since it involves several demiurgic beings rather than one creative principle. End quote. The ancient Maya believed the world's an illusion, and the Aborigines believe that this is what they call the dream time, and that there exists a more real world where we truly reside. Aborigine Dreamtime healer Steve Richards also continuously talks about life being a game, and he who enters the game of another is subject to the laws of their game. He also talks about feeding thought forms, which become life forms, which then become entities. Albert Einstein noted, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one, end quote. And life is a game, and we are pawns for the royal kings, queens, and global beings.
Do you think that we are living in a simulation? Tell us about the simulation matrix, just like in the movie Matrix, by the way.
Yeah, great movie. Woke up a lot of people, I think. Yes, I believe we are living in a simulation, a virtual reality game. More and more people, including scientists, are coming to the realization that this world we live in is quite probably a computer simulation. Nick Bostrom put forward an idea called the simulation theory, in which he postulated the universe we live in is a simulation. And Neil deGrasse Tyson gathered scientists at the 2016 Isaac Asimov Memorial Debate, where the topic was, is the universe a simulation? And Tyson put the odds at 50-50 that our entire existence is a program on someone else's hard drive. Elon Musk recently said, given that we're clearly on a trajectory to have games that are indistinguishable from reality, it would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in a billion.
Isn't Elon Musk an agent, a Matrix agent promoting AI and a Matrix gatekeeper?
Well, I don't know if he's an agent or not, but he seems to be a materialist and a transhumanist, and his ideas would enmesh humanity another layer deeper into this artificial matrix we're already living in. See, if one doesn't believe in a soul or an eternal spirit, then one looks to technology to become immortal. But if we are eternal spirits imprisoned in a physical body, then our goal should be to find out how to escape that prison and ascend to a higher dimension of frequency. I've been reading posts on the Reddit glitch in the matrix subforums where normal people are seeing the matrix grids sometimes upon waking. And this DMT experience online mentioned the grid. It said, staring up into the blank white ceiling, I beheld a domed matrix with superimposed intricate yellow lines. Overall, the matrix was fixed, but as I observed, I became aware of additional elemental lines, slowly perceiving additional detail as one might experience when viewing a master's painting. So another person on Reddit wrote, twice this week I've woken up and there's these goldeny bronze perfect geometrical grid lines in my vision for like 20 seconds. And then they disappear once I'm well awake. But are there long enough for me to know I'm not dreaming? Someone replied, on LSD, I saw grid lines everywhere. I would look at an object and see the grid lines of the object's shape. From the DMT Nexus website, someone said, after several more adventures, I have gotten rid of the fearful aspect of it. Now it's just a repetition of an alien encounter telling me the world I live in is a matrix-type simulation. I'm trying my best to get past this conclusion and venture further into the available experience. And so, while this was happening, I was feeling so frightened of these entities controlling reality. This was a program being run to upgrade that it is. And these alien entities were in control, waving and letting me in on the secret. I came back to live out this natural life, but I know after this experience, I must come to terms with my non-existence and return home for good, not being sucked into this game again.
Do you think we live on a prison planet? And if so, why? Can you explain?
Well, we are certainly imprisoned by our body's cells and chemical compounds, and we are chained to this giant rock by gravity. And we're all enslaved by the economic system and need to work most of our lives unless we want to live off the land. I'm not sure I need to convince you that we're slaves living on a prison planet, but I'll let one of the great philosophers of our age, the late, great comedian George Carlin, summarize it. He said, something is wrong here. War, disease, death, destruction, hunger, filth, poverty, torture, crime, corruption, and the ice capades. Something is definitely wrong. This is not good work. This is the best God can do. I am not impressed. Results like these do not belong on the resume of a supreme being. This is the kind of shit you'd expect from an office temp with a bad attitude. And just between you and me and any decently run universe, this guy would have been out on his all-powerful ass a long time ago, end quote. You know, there are many happy and wonderful things we experience during our time here on Earth, but What if there were better planes of existence where there's no suffering or pain?
Yes, George Carlin was a great guy. Yeah,
Yeah, I
R.I.P.
love this.
In regards to the universal, multiversal, omniversal food chain, are humans, do you think, merely food of the gods?
Yeah, I mean, at times here on Earth can be downright brutal, and it's survival of the fittest. Each creature in the food chain must each day secure its next meal in order to survive. This means killing one another in a constant game of survival. As humans, we like to think we're at the top of the food chain, but there could be entities just outside our perception that are feeding off our life force. We are drained of our energy each day until we recharge at night and also over the course of our lives. I mean, children have boundless energy while our elderly need walkers, canes, or bedridden. Aborigine shaman and dreamtime healer Steve Richards teaches that we have both internal and external entities. External entities include draconians, reptilians, gargoyles, winged serpents, aliens, and other forms of dimensional beings. An internal entity is something we've created. So, for example, if I had a belief of not being good enough, that starts as a thought. Over time, if this thought is continually fed, it becomes a thought form, and everything has the right to exist. The thought form over time eventually, therefore, becomes a life form in its own right, and thus becomes an internal entity. An external entity, however, is outside our field and needs to use entrapment to get you to agree to let them in. And in her book, The Unquiet Dead, Dr. Edith Fiore, a hypnotherapist, wrote about many of her clients having spirit attachments and being possessed.
Right. I think you could have mentioned doppelgangers as well, right? I think they,
Doppelgangers, yeah.
yeah. Can you please tell us about this emotional and spiritual energy that's called moosh?
Sure.
Hmm.
Loosh is a term Robert Monroe used. He was a pioneer in out of body experiences. He wrote, "We were indeed producing something of value, loosh. Loosh, an energy generated by all organic life in varying degrees of purity, the clearest and most potent coming from humans, engendered by human activity which triggers emotion, the highest of such emotions being love. Is love loosh? Using the same stuff, interactive experience, one began to learn to express anger, pain, fear, and all the rest, and finally, hopefully if you pass the course, a special energy waveform labeled love. Yet we don't really know what it is. To learn to be high-quality loosh love producers, and those who possess loosh find it vital for whatever it's used for. But faced with this question of supply and demand, someone decided to produce it artificially, so to speak, rather than search for it in its natural form. He decided to build a garden and grow loosh. Monroe also wrote, if a smart transmitter propagates certain waves, they can resonate with other related vibrations of like kind to form a multiple pattern which, if thought of as light, would be white. So in and of itself, you don't have the end product antenna or transducer, just one of the oscillators. You may never display actual loose radiation, but you have a vital part in its production. So he wrote, it must be quite a place to handle that much loose this somewhere. It would fall neatly in the many concepts of heaven. He also mentioned an emitter which generates this hologram we live in. He wrote, the aperture is just ahead. It will open soon. Beside it, you can perceive the emitter for the energy beam that creates what you call the dream, the hologram, in quote. In Return from Tomorrow, George Ritchie recounts a near-death experience where he saw spirits attaching themselves to people's auras, especially in bars and living vicariously through them. Near-death experiencer Joe G experienced entities feeding off them. He said, then I heard someone calling my name and telling me to come along. I was okay, and this is where I was to call home. They were there to guide me home. I could feel something was not right, and I wanted to go back the way I came, but I was told that I could not go back. My time on Earth was done. I was to keep moving, and I would see my mom soon. Then one of them said that it was feeding time. Then I felt them feeding on me, end quote. Another near-death experiencer, Jack, while on ketamine, said, there was a winged beast with a lion/dragon-like face with an evil and hungry smile. It knew I was afraid and fed on it. Carlos Castaneda wrote about his training in shamanism. He said they took over because we are food for them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we reared chickens in chicken coops, gallineros, the predators rear us in human coops, humaneros. Therefore, their food is always available to them. He said they are attracted to emotions. Animal fear is what attracts them the most. It releases the kind of energy that suits them. And finally, he said, the grand trick of those sorcerers of ancient times was to burden the flyer's mind with discipline. Sorcerers found out that if they taxed the flyer's mind with inner silence, the foreign installation would flee and give any one of the practitioners involved in this maneuver the total certainty of the mind's foreign origin. As the alien mind of these creatures comes back, I assure you, but not as strong. And a process begins in which the fleeing of the flyer's mind becomes routine until one day it flees permanently.
Yeah. So that's what Carlos Castaneda said. Parasitic entities are reported everywhere, in lots of DMT, shamanic, psychedelic, telepathic, hypnotic experiences, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. Parasitic entities are commonly reported in ayahuasca ceremonies, for instance.
Mhm.
Ayahuasca is a DMT based substance and herb. And Dr. Rick Strassman, in his book DMT, The Spirit Molecule, noted, he said, quote, I continually feel surprised in seeing how many of our volunteers made contact with them or other beings. At least half did so in one form or another. Research subjects use expressions like entities, beings, aliens, guides, and helpers to describe them. The life forms look like clowns, reptiles, mantises, bees, spiders, cacti, and stick figures. It's still startling to see my written records of comments like, there were these beings, I was being led, they were on me fast, end quote. Another one quote is, the entity then initiated telepathic communication with me. It said that it lived by extracting human thought / emotion. Different types of thought or emotion were valued differently. Those with a more intense energy charge, such as fear or love, were worth more. The entity explained that it existed in another dimension so that it could feed off human thought unhindered. Here's a mushroom experience from shroomery.org. It says, quote, it really felt as if I was on a stretcher in a grass field with lights over me that now felt like flashlights, dark, shadowy entities around me. The Archons knew my consciousness was coming into their frequency. This entire time I felt as if someone or something was looking at me from all directions but never directly. It was in my peripheral vision and awareness that I felt this presence of an eye looking at me as a dark eye lingers in the tree line, the eye represented by the Illuminati, the archonic control grid realm itself. I felt the eye presence in my peripheral vision, and as I turned to look towards it, it would shift into my peripheral vision, and this happened by any direction I would look. I told it to please don't hurt me, I come in peace, as my breathing was very shallow and heavy. The more shallow the breath, the more intense the feelings and visuals. They feed on fear, depression, anger, sadness, low frequency emotions. They've been feeding from my soul for a very long time, end quote. On DMT Nexus website, someone said, I could see entities more distinctly this time. Two in particular watched me arriving and being settled into this landscape. It was like they were farmers. I was being milked or something. I came to realize I was being distracted with information so that they could do what they wanted. Feed, harvest. During these stages, I would have recurring flashes or images of some jellyfish-like creature or something like an octopus with sucked tentacles. Whatever it was, I felt like I was connecting to the tendrils or the tentacles during this feeding phase. End quote. And yet another person on DMT Nexus said, last night I encountered a hunter. I may have been one also. I saw this spider, tick, crab creature. These parasites are ugly and nasty. They feed off humans, either our soul or bodies from the parallel dimension. They seem to be attracted to negative emotions. They prefer hiding as they can feed on a host unseen. They can influence thoughts and behavior to suit their goal. End quote.
It sure looks like a mind parasite, doesn't it? What do these archons, parasites, look like? How do they describe them?
Well, I personally believe archons are shapeshifters and they can take any form they desire. And the archons were mentioned by the Gnostics as being so-called rulers. So I think they were the Anunnaki deities and other religious figures. Perhaps they can take form as aliens. There may be a distinction between archons and the more parasitic forms such as shadow beings or shadow people, which may be thought forms which have over time become entities in their own right and keep feeding. I guess it's a matter of terminology. The astral parasites that attach to our energy fields are black, moldy, bile-like, dark, shadowy entities. They've been depicted as ticks, leeches, eels, and octopi with tentacles. There are a lot of movies that show this black goo substance, and The Gnostic text mentioned matter being made from the bile of the shadow, created from the jealousy of the demiurge. In DMT Nexus, someone said, I have experienced these parasites, these Archons, as I've come to learn they are. Supposedly they prefer that term because it means Lord or ruler, which is just what they want you to see them. Yes, so let's just stick with interdimensional parasites because that's what they are. They feed off lower vibrations, and like others have said, that's all they do, is feed off of it. That's all they're really able to do. However, we have more power over them than we think because they are separated from the source, the light. If we connect to the light and higher vibrations, these buggers can't mess with us. Sounds like gullible New Agey bullcrap to read into what the Gnostics had to say to these guys, end quote. Another one said, I remember starting to not feel like myself, like I was possessed by an interdimensional alien. As the trip progressed, this thing really started messing with my energy and reality. I got the impression it fed off my energy and that it was demonic with bad intention. So, now, Alex Gray is an artist whose paintings are inspired by his trips on DMT.
He's not a family relative, don't worry. It's Gray with an E, not with an A.
I didn't even make the connection. Have you seen any of his paintings? It's pretty...
I think so, yes.
Yeah, his most popular works are Collective Vision, which shows a dome with a light at the center and a multitude of eyes surrounding it. He has another piece in a book called The Net of Being. He worked with the popular alternative rock band Tool in a video called Vicarious to put his visions into video format. That Tool and Alex Gray decided to use the song Vicarious to showcase the DMT imagery. It's very telling as these archonic entities do live vicariously off us like vampires. The lyrics of the song reveal as much. They say, don't look at me like I'm a monster. Vicariously I live while the whole world dies. We won't give pause until the blood is flowing. Part vampire, part warrior, carnivore, and voyeur. The universe is hostile, so impersonal. Devour to survive, so it is. So it's always been. We all feed on tragedy. It's like blood to a vampire. Vicariously I live while the whole world dies. Much better you than I, end quote. A reader of mine wrote me and related an experience while using DMT. He wrote, a while back I had some psychedelic experiences that depicted alien farmers who shadowed me around their planet. The first one I met was standing in a field behind a fence. It was very tall and lanky. It took me in and brought me to some others that were equally tall and lanky, gray and emotionless. They put me in a bed that sort of felt like a bobsled, pushed me down a track to where I met with some others who were identical to them. But I was now in a lab. They shadowed me around, did the long-term thing, then slid me down a track back to Earth, and my consciousness was still. That I remember specifically that I stood off to the side and watched stars shoot across the landscape from left to right in my vision, and was told that those were space travelers trying to make the transition from Earth to the farms. I'm not sure what they were farming. They sent out a white jet-like aircraft that resembles a rocket, which is why I wanted to get away. I thought I was attacked. But I was in a white bullet-like capsule, I guess you could say. The capsule, and instead of attacking me, the jet captured me and took me into the train, and then it took me off to those farms, end quote. About 6 months later, he emailed me again about an OBE or lucid dream he had, and he said, while trying to astral project, I ended up lucid dreaming. I wasn't quite lucid, more like I knew I had something, I had to do something. My main reason why I was trying to astral project was to discover more about this matrix, or whatever it turns out to be. So while in a dream, I was trying really hard to get myself to fly up into space. It's like I knew something was up there and I had to get to it. When I flew all the way into space, I ended up landing on an object and felt like this is what I was looking at, or this is what I was looking for. I had finally gotten to it. Everything was extremely vivid and clear. I could see the sun, planets, and it all looked extremely real. The device I had landed on, the part on which I was standing, was made of iron beams, which were constructed very similarly to those I sent in the picture. However, it was in the shape of a square. There were two parts that were rotating around it. They had copper in them. I saw some smaller parts of similar shape rotating along with them. I'll try to draw it sometime and send it through the drawing. Yeah, also, when I touched one of the beams with my hands, a thought came across my mind. This is used to charge something way more, something a whole lot bigger. I expected on a whole new scale. Without a doubt, it was orbiting Earth. That I am certain. I remember shouting, "Moon is the Matrix," once in my dream. Also, every other time I had a vivid dream, a device/machine was present. Like when I ended up going to the farms, there was a white train-like machine, end quote. Now, there was a magical Babylonian invocation to Nergal, who is the god of the underworld. And it mentions the shades or shadow beings feeding off blood. It says, Nergal, who takes the form of a lion/dragon, raise thy blade. To that terrifying splendor, no other god stands before. Hail to thee, Nergal, dragon supreme, great god. I call you by the fires of Sharapu, thou burning fires of conquest, by the funeral rites to which you were called, to the shades which drink blood in your name. End quote. The Aztecs, Inca, and Maya Indians all made sacrifices to the sun. And a steady supply of hearts and blood was essential not only for themselves, but for all the people of the earth itself, and the gods beyond. War was necessary to guarantee a supply of nourishment for the sun and the entire cosmos. The purpose of war was the feeding of the gods.
That's what we can notice in history. It's been ongoing wars.
Yeah,
and the cycle
like,
has never been broken.
It's like that song by Ozzy Osbourne, pigs, war pigs. When they talk about the generals gather at black masses, and yeah, it's like a sacrifice. So anyway, the book, The Body Electric, details how the heart of man generates electricity. This electricity can be fed off of by entities. In a New Scientist article, Meet the Electric Life Forms That Live on Pure Energy. Unlike any other life on Earth, these extraordinary bacteria use energy in its purest form. They eat and breathe electrons. They are everywhere. This article hints toward there being some substance to that claim. The article appeared in print under the headline, The Electricity Eater. The article starts out, stick an electrode in the ground, pump electrons down it, and they will come. Living cells that eat electricity. Also, when threatened, certain species shoot bright flashes of light to stun and confuse their enemies. There are numerous creatures that feed off light itself. Many fish use light to lure food in. The anglerfish, for instance, dangles a light in the darkness to lure its prey. Cuttlefish hypnotize their prey with a dazzling light show. Glowworms in Antarctica hang from the ceilings of caves and look like the nighttime sky, attracting prey who are lured by the lights. The Gnostic Nagmati library and the Gospel of Philip says, quote, God is a man-eater. For this reason, men are sacrificed to him. End quote. That should cause one to wonder the next time they hear the preacher tell the congregation, let us pray.
Yeah, pray with an E or with an A, basically.
Exactly. Who's the us?
Yeah.
The congregation or the entities?
Do you think it's frequency that keeps us imprisoned in various low states of consciousness?
Yes, exactly. It's this low state of consciousness of frequency that keeps us imprisoned here. We're asleep and need to wake up to our true origin. I'm organizing a prison break, and I've taken as many spirits with me as I can. Nikola Tesla said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Because, we perceive but a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum of energy. It's classified by wavelength and, radio waves, microwaves, infrared, the visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. And also there are 5 categories of brainwave states, which range from delta waves at 0 hertz to theta, alpha, beta, all the way to gamma waves at 100 hertz, which are associated with peak focus, concentration, insight, and expanded consciousness. Near-death experiences reveal that a soul sheds its physical body and lower animal, everyday normal waking consciousness, or ego, and experiences the afterlife with a true expanded consciousness or awareness of its soul, which is described as pure consciousness. Now, souls experience this state of super consciousness whether they go to the light or not. I've talked to near-death experiences who felt the love and they never even went through the tunnel or entered the light. It's the natural state of our soul being free from the physical body, which is yoked to an animal brain on account of this spirit. Now, Matilda M., in her near-death experience, she said, I was this refined, sublime consciousness. Jeff C. said, it's a self-identity separate from consciousness, more like a super consciousness. Nancy H. said, although my body looked unconscious, my mind/spirit was hyper-aware. Victor C., who had a transformative spiritual experience, said, what I experienced was a passing through space between my thoughts, which led me from the state of consciousness that comes with being in my body to the state of infinite awareness that lies behind consciousness, the state in which the body, consciousness, and all other attachments are surrendered and seemingly left behind, end quote. Scientist Max Planck said, I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. This mind is the matrix of all matter. End quote. So the true superconsciousness of our soul is artificially held down and regulated by the brain. There's a governor or a regulator in our brain which keeps the frequency from going higher and helps to keep us dumbed down and sleep. Keep in mind the Sumerian texts say humans were scientifically engineered upgrades to the indigenous primitive man that already existed on Earth for the purpose of being worker slaves for the Inuna gods. So they wanted us to be intelligent enough to take orders, but not smart enough to overthrow them. The Gnostic text on the origin of the world says, quote, since that day, the seven rulers have fashioned man with his body resembling their body, but his likeness resembling the man that adhered to them. His modeling took place by parts, one at a time, and their leader fashioned the brain and the nervous system.
Yes, actually, our life expectancy can be also another limit, a trick to keep us from thinking too hard and too long about our status. I want in that prison break whenever you're ready. What do you think of our origins? Are there Sumer or Mesopotamia? Is there some credence to that?
Yeah, the first civilization that we know of is the Sumerian civilization. I mean, there could have been Atlantis and other civilizations that got wiped out or lost, but the first civilization that we know is the Sumerian civilization. So in order to better understand where we came from and why we're here, it would be helpful to go back as far as we reliably can and examine creation stories of the Sumerians. After all, they described the fashioning of man. First of all, the Anunnaki did not technically create anything. They modified what was here and made new species, but they did not create the life on this planet. Nama was the primordial mother goddess. The texts say, Nama told Enki, please apply the skill deriving from your wisdom and create a substitute for the gods so that they can be freed from their toil. And after Enki, the fashioner of designs by himself, pondered the matter, he said to his mother Nama, my mother, the creature you plan will really come into existence. End quote. The Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, states, may he shepherd the black-headed ones, his creatures, to the end of days without forgetting, let them acclaim his ways. May he establish for his fathers the great food offerings. May he cause incense to be smelled, their spells. Make a likeness on earth of what he has wrought in heaven. May he order the black-headed to revere him. Let the black-headed wait on their gods. End quote. The god Ea, or Enki, began to say, why are you destroying mankind? They will not give sacrifices to the gods. They will not burn cedar as incense to you. If you destroy mankind, they will no longer worship the gods. End quote. Now, the Mesopotamian god of the underworld, Nergal, the son of Enlil, was the god of war and plague, who was not very high in status early on. But at some point, the chief god An helped him by giving him 7 companions or weapons, otherwise known as 7 evil spirits. Quote, Lord of the underworld, who acts swiftly in everything, whose terrifying anger smites the wicked, Nergal, single-handed crusher who tortures the disobedient. End quote. J.C. Greenfield wrote, an epithet of the god Nergal in Hatra inscriptions is related to his role of punishing divinity in the meaning of executioner, butcher, torturer. He was primarily keeper of the underworld and the god of pestilence. As the god of the underworld, he functioned as a judge. His lion-headed mace was able to punish and wreak vengeance. Quote. Another quote says, being a deity of the desert, god of fire, Nergal was sometimes called a demon and even identified with Satan. In the book, The 7 Great Monarchies of the Ancient Eastern World, it chronicles Nergal's move to Israel. The quote is, the city peculiarly dedicated to Nergal was Kutha. Hence, the men of Kuth, when transported to Samaria by the Assyrians, naturally enough made Nergal their god, carrying his worship with them into their new country. End quote. Even in the New Testament, Jesus enters into the temple teaching and talking to the Pharisees. Jesus states that his father is not the same as their father. He says, ye are of your father the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning. End quote. Remember that Nergal was the lord of pestilence, war, and the underworld, that's death. Now look at how Yahweh operates in just a couple of many Old Testament quotes below about Yahweh or Jehovah. This quote, sacrifice unto the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. For now I would stretch out my hand that I might smite thee and thy people with pestilence. So the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel, and there fell of Israel 70,000 men. Yahweh was a composite of many gods, such as An, Enlil, Enki, Zoroaster, Mithra, El, and others, but his personality and attributes most closely mirror Nergal. Nergal was worshipped by the Greeks as Ares, the god of war. From Ares probably came the word aristocracy, which is the Greek term used for the ruling class, who are deemed to be best or supreme to the lower classes. Ariel, pronounced Ariel, literally means lion of God, and is another name the Gnostics used for the demiurge. Ariel in the human Bible is one of the names for Jerusalem and the Temple of Jerusalem. In Hebrew, the land of Israel is Eres Yisrael. Thus the word for land, as in the promised land, is pronounced the same as the war god, Ares. Wikipedia also equates Azrael with the angel of death, even in Hebrew, also spelled Israel, Israel, and Azrael. Nergal, the god of the underworld or hell, the devil, has a lion as a symbol. His temple and people were moved from his home Kutha to Samaria, the kingdom of Israel. The tribe of Judah put the lion on their official emblem and flag. The devil is described in the Bible as a lion seeking to devour, and the Gnostics say the false god, the demiurge, has the face of a lion. I noticed that only a handful of near-death experiencers reported being able to see the face of God, but a few of those who did saw the face of a lion. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's my question coming from a Leo.
No, yeah.
Are religions based
I'm a
upon...
Cancer.
Oh, okay. Well, are religions based upon ancient secret societies? It seems that way.
Yeah, I mean, all the major religions were created by the Illuminati Brotherhood, in my opinion. All the major saviors or princes were in the line of the royal family. Buddha and Krishna were princes. There was a movie made about Moses called The Prince of Egypt. He was, supposedly raised in the court of Pharaoh. And even Jesus and Muhammad had royal blood. Of all the major religions, were created and influenced by a group known as the Shepherd Kings, or Royal Shepherds. Some researchers also claim them to be Serpent Kings. It came from the city known as Kutha. It seems the Gushans took over Kutha and set up the temple for Nergal, and then the Gushans, Kuthim, Khazars of the royal shepherd kings of the Anunnaki spread the religions over the rest of the globe. The Emperor of France, Napoleon, said, quote, "Religion is what keeps the poor man from murdering the rich." End quote. So religion is nothing but a royal scam of the royal family. And the Bible even says Lucifer masquerades as an angel of light in 2 Corinthians. It also says, quote, "I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things." End quote.
Yeah, well, even Templars came from Princess bloodlines. What do Gnostic texts tell us, and what do they come from?
Well, the Gnostics believed in knowing the truth through direct experience rather than through faith. They believed the soul is imprisoned in the body and that the God of this world is not the true ultimate God, whereas there's a lesser creator God called the demiurge. The concept of a demiurge seemed to originate with Greek philosophers such as Plato. The Gnostics were influenced by the Greek philosophers and saw the demiurge as more of an evil entity and not a necessary evil. They said the God of the Old Testament Yahweh is the false God. According to the Gnostics, one of the newest eons or emanations of God named Sophia created the demiurge. One version says it was out of a desire to create her own realm, similar to the eternal light realm. Others say it was an effort to better know or understand the ineffable Father. The texts say this was done without consulting her consort, the ineffable Father. Thus the demiurge was, quote, "without spirit," perhaps a way of saying it was an AI creation having consciousness but no soul. And when she saw her inferior creation, which was without spirit, she became embarrassed and placed the veil up and put the demiurge on a throne within a cloud so that it could not be seen. The demiurge, being alone, thought himself to be God. When he was informed he was not the true God, he became jealous, and out of this jealousy, shadow beings or Archons were created. He stole the light power from Sophia. This universe and mankind was created by the demiurge and his archonic parasite, but in order to get man to stand, the demiurge was tricked into breathing the breath of life or light power into him. Adam was divine because of the light power. Thus man has an inner light within, which consists of a divine spark. But the demiurge and rulers bonded every man with a counterfeit spirit, which records all his actions and compels him on to negative thoughts and actions. The Archons supposedly were produced not full and are unable to hold the light power. Sophia repented and was forgiven, and a correction was enacted from the eternal light realm, and Christ was sent to show the way out of the matrix. Gnostics took forth ideas about the universe being a holographic copy a couple thousand years ago. And in the Gnostic book On the Origin of the World, it was written, quote, likeness emanated, became a product resembling the primeval light, manifested as a likeness of heaven, end quote. It says, quote, come, let us create a man out of earth, according to the image of our body and according to the likeness of his being, to serve us, so that when he sees his likeness, he might become enamored of it. No longer will he ruin our work. Rather, we shall make those who are born out of the light our servants for all the duration of this eternal realm. And it says, quote, now all this came to pass according to the forethought of Pistis, in order that man should appear after his likeness and should condemn them because of their modeled form. And their modeled form became an enclosure of the light, and it is they who were taken captive according to their destinies by the prime parent. And thus they were shut into the prisons of the modeled forms until the consummation of the age. It also says, after the natural structure of the immortal beings that completely developed out the infinite, a likeness then emanated from Pistis, called Sophia. It exercised volition and became a product resembling the primeval light. And immediately her will manifested itself as a likeness of heaven, having an unimaginable magnitude, those between the immortal beings and those beings that came into being after them, like she functioned as a veil dividing mankind from the things above, end quote. In the Gnostic text, Pistis Sophia, it's written, quote, she had been deluded through the godlike self-will, and had not been deluded through anything else, save through a light power because of its resemblance to the light in which she had had faith. Now here's a quote from the Secret Book of John, which is a Gnostic text. It says, Yadabaoth said to the authorities with him, come, let us create a human being after the image of God and with a likeness to ourselves, so this human image may give us light. End quote. And so the demiurge's heavens are a copy of the real heaven. It said, and she established each of his offspring in conformity with its power, and after the pattern of the realms that are above. For by starting from the invisible world, the visible world was presented. So his realms are a copy of the real thing. He's stolen light from Sophia, so they have light to use. And the real light is from source, and those light realms could be set up similarly. So the demiurge is a false god. I spell it G-A-U-D, because dictionary.com explains that the word God, G-A-U-D, originated from the mid and late 14th century and meant, quote, a jest, joke, prank, trick, also fraud, deception, trick, or artifice. One last quote says, and what she had created became a product in the matter, like an aborted fetus, and it assumed the plastic form molded out of shadow and became an arrogant beast resembling a lion. It changed into the form of a lion-faced serpent, and its eyes were like lightning fires which flash.
Yeah, basically, it's all about deception. This world is. Can you please? Yeah, according to the Gnostics, please tell us about the New Age movement masquerade. What's in there for us to discern or decipher?
Okay, well, yeah, recently we've gone through this New Age movement where followers open up their energy fields to so-called ascended masters, spirit guides, guardian angels, extraterrestrials, and the like. And in my opinion, all these are merely archons in masquerade. True angels and divine beings don't come here to this dualistic realm unless they be trapped here along with us. It's too dangerous. They don't interfere with the game or the reality TV show. I have just recently been in correspondence with a woman who attended such angel gatherings and wrote me about how in the end they had drained her of her energy. She wrote, quote, I've had experiences with an ET, archangels, and dolphins during various occasions. I used to be very involved with various spiritual groups, and I'm very sensitive to energy and was able to connect with these beings. My life and the lives of the other people involved turned absolutely terrible, and now I have no doubt those beings were from the false light. I am working on cleaning up my energy and reversing the pain and illness they inflicted on me. It's not my intention to judge. I just find it very suspicious that so many people whom I've come across in spiritual groups are such a mess. It feels counterintuitive. Shouldn't angels help us make better choices and make us feel better? Finally, my experience with an Arcturian ET, she said I joined a group. The guide channeled the fifth dimensional beings, and we were told that they wanted to help us ascend to either the fourth or fifth dimension, depending upon a person's level of consciousness. I participated in various group meditations. The premise was that if you read the book and follow some instructions, you might just get a visit by an ET, and I did. It occurred first thing in the morning when I was in the in-between state of sleeping and waking. I opened my eyes and an ET was standing next to my bed. I immediately wanted to scream, but he quickly calmed me and told me to close my eyes so that I would not be afraid. He communicated telepathically. He was about 6 feet, looked like a lizard, and had huge bug eyes. It looked like something you might see in a movie. You ever watched Land of the Lost? It looked a bit like a slee stack. She said, for about 30 minutes, the ET infused me with energy. I could feel it, and I loved it. I also had the sense he was scanning my body in some way, but I do not know. The energy I received was intense, but healing, loving, and joyful. After it ended, I was frozen for about an hour. I could not move, and I was afraid to open my eyes. When they tell you to do something, it takes a lot of willpower not to obey. They are very controlling. Or perhaps I am very submissive to them. They have a way of making me feel like putty in their hands. For days, I felt wonderful, best I've ever felt. I wanted to jump from rooftop to rooftop because I felt invincible, but then I crashed. I became very ill. I laid in bed for about 6 months. My husband would come home from work at 6 p.m. and make me some dinner. I did not have the strength to shower most days. I was a mess. Slowly, I did improve, but I am still to this day not 100%. I'm not able to work or function like I used to. He said at my first angel gathering for 2 nights straight, I was not able to sleep at all. I had terrible sleep deprivation. It felt as though they were busy working on me, and the incessant chatter never stopped. The angels always warned us to be aware of what they called traps. They were also obsessed with rituals and ceremonies. I never liked it. It was a red flag and felt very cultish. Since my involvement with the angels, my comprehension and memory have been diminished. She said, I really cannot think of one person who benefited from connecting with angels or ETs. I understand most people do have problems, but the severity of problems in the New Cage community is pretty suspicious.
Yeah, the new cage is the right word, the right term, the right term to use. I know several various ET worshipping communities, and I've interviewed quite a few, so-called hybrids, and also ET experiencers, and they all seem to be subdued by this Stockholm syndrome, and not even aware of their energy being sucked off of them. Can you tell us about the government rituals and actions, because the government is very involved in all this phenomenon?
Yeah, regarding the aliens, it just seems like people are always looking for someone else to come in and save them. But yeah, the word government comes from govern, which means to rule or control, and ment, which means mental or of the mind. That's the word government literally means mind control. Many members of the power elite who run the world are members of secret societies like Freemasonry, whose membership includes many powerful government officials. They reenact religious rituals that go back at least as far as ancient Egypt. Also, you have the elite attending ceremonies at Bohemian Grove, such as the cremation of care, in which mock sacrifices are offered before a giant stone owl, perhaps symbolic of Minerva, the goddess of wisdom and war, whose symbol was the owl. But some people might say this is all ancient religion and mythology, and today's leaders don't subscribe to such nonsense. But even the World Olympic Games enact ceremonies using a cauldron, which is lit by the rays of the sun, and constantly they use sun, moon, and Luciferian symbolism. The media guide for the opening ceremony of the 2012 London Games even said, quote, the first torchbearer was Prometheus, who stole fire from Mount Olympus and gave it as a gift to mankind, end quote. That's interesting, since the Oxford Dictionary of English Etymology associates Prometheus with Lucifer. Another way in which the powers that be control our minds is with movies and music. And with movies, all the images go into the subconscious mind. The flickering images in movies and the hypnotic, repetitive beat of music places us in a light state of trance, which puts the mind in a relaxed state and more receptive to the message.
Yeah, lots of symbols in movies, and Prometheus was a movie titled by Ridley Scott, and it was in the Alien trilogy or something. Movies in Hollywood are telling us a lot. And what is it exactly? Of course, you mentioned all those mind-controlled movie stars and showbiz celebrities who seem to be coming down actually from this MK Ultra program, mind control program. A lot of them are speaking out, and they feel depressed, and they come down from their trip, their mind control trip these days, like Katy Perry and Lady Gaga and so forth.
Yeah. Well, a lot can be gleaned from looking at the names that that the Hollywood and movie music industry use. I'll go over a few of the names and symbols that are used, and then we can look at some specific messages. But the name for Hollywood is even connected to Druid magic and casting spells, since magic wands were always made out of the wood of the holly tree. That is made out of holly wood. The National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, NATAS, or Satan spelled backwards. Now, this is the organization that distributes the Emmy Awards and recognizes excellence in the television industry and corresponds to the Academy Awards. The Oscar statue, the Academy Awards, gets its name from Osir or Osiris, the Egyptian god, usually identified as the god of the afterlife, the underworld, and the dead. The logo for DreamWorks Pictures depicts a boy sitting on the moon with a fishing pole and its lure presumably dangling below on Earth. You got the movie series Star Wars, which featured a spaceship in disguise as a moon and was called the Death Star. The movie poster for the horror movie The Ring features a solar eclipse, and the caption, "Before you die, you see the ring." It's an uncanny coincidence that the moon's diameter is about 400 times smaller than the sun's, yet it's 400 times closer to the Earth, 380 actually, so that it just perfectly blocks out the sun during a total eclipse. Now, another eerie coincidence is that the moon just happens to rotate slow enough that the same side always faces the Earth. Isn't that convenient? The pilot for Star Trek, the original series, was called The Cage and featured short gray beings who used telepathy to intrude upon the crew's thoughts and feelings in order to feed off them. Later in the first season, the episode The Return of the Archons featured robed and hood beings who ruled over a planet whose populace acted like mindless zombies. They shared a hive mind, and the beings threatened the Star Trek crew to be absorbed into the collective body of their absorption chambers. Spock called them soulless parts with no spirit, working in unison for the tranquility of the machine. The leader, Landru, was projected from a machine in a control room. This seemed to be the precursor to the hive mind of the Borg collective.
Yes, actually, hooded beings are quoted, mentioned in many abduction stories, ET abduction
and
stories.
near-death experiences.
Also, right.
Mm-hmm. In the Star Trek Voyager episode Coda, Captain Janeway is almost fooled by an alien into thinking she has died. The alien poses as her father, imploring her to follow him into the light. She's suspicious of his intentions and refuses. The alien tells her, "This is what my species does. At the moment just before death, one of us comes down to help you understand what's happening, to make the crossing over an occasion of joy." She asks, "And what is that?" pointing at the matrix of light behind him. And it says, "Our matrix, where your consciousness will live. Eventually, you'll come into my matrix and you will nourish me for a long, long time." She tells him to go back to hell. Afterwards, she discusses the encounter with one of her crew and asks, "Do you think it's possible that each of the near-death experiences we've heard about are the result of an alien inhabitation?" The Wizard of Oz may be one of the best examples out there. The Scarecrow needed a brain to acquire knowledge or gnosis. The Cowardly Lion needed courage to overcome fear. The Tin Man needed a heart to learn to love. Dorothy, representing the consciousness, being immersed, had to kill the evil witch, her ego or counterfeit spirit, to progress. The good witch was the enlightened afterthought propelling us onward. I like the analogy of Dorothy going through the vortex tunnel, over the rainbow of color, into the dream world or astral, and the demiurge wizard using tricks and deception to run the emerald crystal city of light, which is very similar to the near-death experiences. And then Dorothy repeating a mantra, "There's no place like home, there's no place like home," with focused, willful intent to wake up from the dream and return back home. Some other movies with Gnostic themes are The Matrix, as you mentioned, The Truman Show, The Prisoner, They Live, Dark City, The Island, The Game, Gamer, Westworld, and Childhood's End. Childhood's End is interesting as it's based on a book by Arthur C. Clarke. As with that book, 2001 Space Odyssey, Childhood's End also deals with aliens and the future evolution of mankind. into a potentially different form. The three parts are entitled The Overlords, The Deceivers, and The Children. And the movie depicts a scenario in which God is an overmind, or a collective consciousness of white light, and desires for mankind to evolve into one mind. Here are a few quotes from the book. So, quote, possibly what we have called the overmind is still training them, molding them into one unit before it can wholly absorb them into its being. There lay the overmind, whatever it might be, bearing the same relation to man as man bore to amoeba, potentially infinite, beyond mortality. How long had it been absorbing race after race as it spread across the stars? We are the interpreters, the guardians, or to use one of your own metaphors, we till the field until the crop is ripe. The overmind collects the harvest, and we move on to another task. End quote. So there's an overmind which is trying to grow and extend its power so that it absorbs race after race to unite into its being as it spreads across the stars. It's depicted as a white light, but when it makes contact with the representative from Earth, it's the classic devil, the personification of evil.
Can you tell us about what music really means in the media? I know I've noticed recently, because I didn't pay attention back in the days when I used to sing along, those old tunes. But there's a lot of words referring to the devil in old rock and roll tunes.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's half the time you can't understand the lyrics, but if you look at the lyric sheet, you can see it. But sure, the word music comes from the word muse. In the mythology, the muses were 9 goddesses of Zeus. The muses were said to be the source of inspiration for men. Now, the hypnotic beat of music relaxes the body and puts our minds in a light trance state where we are easily receptive to the message or intent in the song. Some music can lift the spirit and put one in a good mood. Other music, such as trance or trap music, can be hypnotic, and rap or hip-hop music and metal music often have negative messages. If you take the 12 notes of the chromatic music scale and place them on the face of a clock and connect the black keys, it traces the shape of a pentagram. Virtually every big-name rock group has a song about the sun and moon. Some of it's very telling, but Bruce Springsteen wrote this song called Blinded by the Light that Manfred Mann did. He says, some fresh-sown moonstone was messing with this frozen zone to remind him of the feeling of romance. The shooting star was riding in a sidecar, humming a lunar tune. He was just blinded by the light, cut loose like a deuce, another runner in the night, blinded by the light. Mama always told me not to look into the sights of the sun. Oh, but Mama, that's where the fun is. I was blinded. In the song Dreamweaver by Gary Wright, he says, fly me high through the starry skies, maybe to an astral plane. Fly me away to the bright side of the moon and meet me on the other side. Ooh, Dreamweaver, I believe you can get me through the night. Ooh, Dreamweaver, I believe we can reach the morning light. AC/DC in Hell's Bell says, see the white light flashing as I split the night. Nobody's putting up a fight. I got my bell. I'm going to take you to hell. I'm going to get you. Satan get you. The Eagles in Hotel California sing, on a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. There she stood in the doorway. I heard the mission bell, and I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven or this could be hell. Then she lit up a candle, and she showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say, welcome to the Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave, end quote. And then, of course, Led Zeppelin in Stairway to Heaven says, yes, there are 2 paths you can go by. The Piper's calling you to join him. And as we wind on down the road, our shadows hollow in our soul. There walks a lady we all know who shines white light and wants to show how everything still turns to gold. On the website Dark Lyrics, there are songs such as White Light Suicide by Witchcraft, The Blinding of False Light by As I Lay Dying, False Light by Isis, and Pied Piper by Lexicol.
Yes, and probably many more of those tunes referring to the light and false light, and the 2 paths that we can take. Can you tell us about the sun and the afterlife? What's the involvement of the sun in connection to the afterlife?
Okay, well, the white light is obviously reminiscent of the stories from near-death experiencers, but it's also interesting to note that our sun actually shines white light. And it is possible that the white light that near-death experiencers speak about is the sun on the astral plane. Consider the light could be the essence or soul of our sun. A large number of near-death experiencers do compare the light to the sun. There's lots of them. And there are quite a few near-death experiencers who say that we do go to the sun. And both the moon and sun have played a prominent role in almost all the Olympic ceremonies. As I mentioned, the Olympic torch is lit from the rays of the sun via a cauldron, their own word for it. And the sun is also a central element in many secret societies' teachings and incorporated into the names and symbols. Now, here's just a few NDEs which mention the sun. Marta N said, all of a sudden I looked up, I saw light. Now I don't know if it was the spiritual plane or the sun. Maria TK said, then the light came. I was thrown straight into the middle of the sun, straight into the middle of the warmest, most beautiful, most welcoming light, where I instantly felt that here I feel good. I was drawn to the ocean of light as a gigantic magnet and drowned in light. They asked her, did you see an unearthly light? She said, yes, the light was exactly like the center of the sun. CG said, I began to see an intense light in front of me. Perhaps it was the sun, except it was really intense. Lynn M said, before I actually got out further into the cosmos, I sensed going for a massive light energy. I think now it was our sun. Now, NASA, there's this article on space.com where it says NASA has turned science fiction into science fact by announcing the discovery of hidden portals in Earth's magnetic field. And the NASA spokesman said, there are places where the magnetic fields of Earth connects to the magnetic fields of the sun, creating an uninterrupted path leading from our own planet to the sun's atmosphere 93 million miles away. And the portal takes the form of a magnetic cylinder about as wide as Earth. He says the FDE is like a giant rolling pin that lies flat along the boundary between Earth's and sun's magnetic fields. And they look like roller pins, and they form as little blob roller pins at the tip of the magnetosphere facing the sun. And they said they cannot decide which way they're going to slide around Earth, so they grow there in a big roller pins, and then they take off and sort of spirally roll along Earth's magnetosphere like you're pounding out dough.
So, Wayne, what is the moon really all about, according to your research?
Well, our moon is a very curious and suspicious object. I think there's a good chance that it's an alien outpost and plays a major role in keeping us in a slower frequency and dream state. It's even possible that it plays a role in the control grid system and in the portal or tunnel that near-death experiencers talk about. It's been mentioned as a transfer station between worlds. Some researchers, such as Richard Hoagland and John Lear, have mentioned structures such as a dome, a spire, and a tower on the moon. I think Edgar Mitchell even told us directly in your interview, Mark, with him that his co-astronauts took footage and saw buildings on the moon.
Yes.
Although we may not be sure about the Apollo program's hoax or not, but anyway, consider this. It's an eerie coincidence that during a total eclipse, the moon's diameter is about 400 times smaller than the sun, yet it's 400 times closer to the Earth. So it just perfectly blocks out the sun during a solar eclipse. And on the backside of the moon is another eerie coincidence that the moon just happens to rotate slow enough that it's the same side always faces Earth. So, I think I mentioned in Star Wars where the space station was disguised as the moon. And so look at him. He's heading for that small moon. That's no moon. It's the space station. We're caught in a tractor beam and it's pulling us in. There's a book by Jules Cashford called From the Moon, or it's called The Moon, Myth and Image, and she relates tales of, there's a section called The Moon as the Dealer of Death, where the Maoris called the moon the man-eater, the source of death, and she devotes a whole section to the moon as the abode of souls, and yet another to the moon as a stage in the journey to the sun. A lot of this is from mythology, of course, but and then there seem to be a number of towers on the moon. There was a released NASA photo numbered Lunar Orbiter 3-84M, and it quite clearly shows two structures rising up in the sinus medii region. And the first of these became referred to as the shard. And the structure towers up from the moon's surface for about a half a mile, and near the shard is another structure referred to as the tower. And it's been photographed 4 times from 2 different altitudes. And it rises about 5 miles and is capped with what appears to be cubes joined together. And you have the remote viewer, Ingo Swann, and in his book Penetration, he said, I found towers, machinery, lights of different colors, strange looking buildings. I found bridges whose function I couldn't figure out. One of them just arched out and never landed anywhere. There were a lot of domes of various sizes, round things, things like saucers with windows. These were stored next to crater sides, sometimes in caves, sometimes in what looked like airfield hangars. I had problems estimating sizes, but some of the things were very large. I found long tube-like things, machinery, tractor-like things going up and down hills, straight roads extending some miles, obelisks which had no apparent function. There were large platforms on domes, large cross-like structures. End quote. The near-death experiencer KDW said, then all of a sudden I was rapidly sucked into what I thought was this full moon. That night the moon was a sliver, so this was the light that near-death experiencers talk about. Ron A. said, as I took a look around, I saw a bright light. It was the moon. The sun was reflecting light off the moon's surface. We were in space, equal distance to the moon on the right side. I do not think this was heaven's final destination. I think it was a greeting area to receive us when we cross over, end quote. And then the Gnostic book, Pistis Sophia, they talk about, says, and this is quote, and further, the receivers of the sun and the receivers of the moon, they look above and see the configurations of the past of the eons and the configurations of the fate and those of the sphere. Then they take from them the light power, and the receivers of the sun get it ready and deposit it until they hand it over to the receivers of Melchizedek, the light purifier. And their material refuse they bring to the sphere, which is below the eons, and fashion it into souls of men, and fashion it also into souls of reptiles and cattle and wild beasts and birds, according to the circle of the rulers of that sphere, and according to all the configurations of its revolution. And they cast them into this world of mankind, and they become souls in this region. So,
yes, strange reports about the moon indeed. You've investigated pre-birth experiences and memories, right? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I'd like to share a few if I could. Most of these were taken from prebirthmemories.com. The first one says, at the end of all this, I begged the powers to let me stay in the heavenly land. I told them I'd been well behaved all those years and hadn't done anything wrong. They acknowledged this, but stated that the people who stayed there permanently had had exemplary lives for their previous life, but that I hadn't really. I knew then that they wanted me to have another life on Earth. At this point, I remembered that I had had many previous lives and felt dismayed I'd have to have another one and be separated from my heavenly friends. Again, I begged them, and the voice asked whether or not I too wanted to have an exemplary last life. At this point, I replied that I didn't particularly. There was a moment of silence where I reflected a little and saw that another life was the most noble choice, and that really there wasn't much choice anyway. She said, my next realization, however, was I would lose my memory. I clearly remember saying out loud, you're going to swipe my memory, aren't you? At this point, there was a moment of silence, which I took as a yes, before I remember my memory slipping away as a dream memory does upon waking. I resisted as fiercely as I could, however, with all my power, feeling a bit of a rebel. The next thing I knew was that I was in my mother's womb and was really happy, as I still had some fairly good recollection of the spirit world and the judgment, and that I hadn't lost all my memory against the odds. Another says, the gatekeeper said, there was a life available that you would be acceptable or suitable for. It would be very difficult and there would be much hardship. You do not have to accept it. It sounded to me like I was being offered a part in a play. Overjoyed and enthusiastic beyond words, I snapped at it. Yes, I'll take it. I'll go. You do not understand, the gatekeeper said. This life will be so difficult that if you take it, you may not be able to return here. At this point, I told him I still wanted to accept the life he described. And although not technically a pre-birth experience, this is from Patrick, a listener who emailed me. He said, I actually exited this whole thing one night and found myself in a flat room with the whole universe contained within a white orbish thing, sitting on a pedestal and a window that reached out into hyperspace. Regarding the exit, I was doing some meditations and realized the chakra system that the New Age tells you to tune into is used by the higher self, which is in fact the Archon demiurge, to feed off of us. The personal anchor system to be here and come back. I started to pulse the energy outwards one by one, and then when all 7 of them were pushing out, it spontaneously happened. Part of the challenge here, he says, is to go into the demiurge, higher self, personal rep, and merge with it, love it, and grow through, out of it, and enclose it within your being. I accomplished this that night and popped out in that room. I busted out a giant Buddha laugh. I came to see that the ultimate graduation test is growing more powerful than that aspect of ourselves, which is unconscious and out of touch with the whole. He said, I also been inside the control room, if you will, of the higher self Archon control system. It's like the architect scene with Neo in the Matrix with all the incarnations on the screen. I traveled through the silver cord to get there. From there is how I popped out into that room I mentioned earlier. It ties into the end of 2001 Space Odyssey scene in the White Room. It was quite unique, though, because the room was two-dimensional, but it was expressed hyperdimensionally is the best way to explain it, end quote. I received another email from a woman in Seattle who wrote, I wanted to share my pre-birth experience, which includes the memory of my most recent past life and my first memory from this one. I was murdered. After I blacked out or died, I remember waking up in a gray, metallic-looking room with garish, hospital-like light coming from everywhere. I was lying on something like a steel slab and was surrounded by stereotypical gray aliens. I was mortified. I had just been murdered, so I went from a nightmare to a hell. I remember putting up a strong fight, kicking, biting, throwing punches at everything, then blacking out again. The next thing I remember is being in a toddler's body and being carried by human-looking entities. They were tall, blonde, and very beautiful. I can only describe them as looking like the drawings people made of Nordic aliens. When I first saw Game of Thrones, I noticed they resembled the Targaryens. However, I was still afraid and knew intuitively that this was a disguise and these were the same beings. They seemed agitated with me, like I had caused problems, and were very stoic and quiet. I then remember being shown a panoramic view of the Earth, like something you see at NASA's website. The very next thing I knew, someone was stuffing me into a frilly yellow dress and white booties. I know that this was a memory from early infancy. I asked my mother how I was dressed when I was brought home from the hospital. She told me I was dressed in a lacy yellow dress and matching yellow and white booties that someone in my father's family had knitted for me before I was born, end quote.
Wow, there's no coincidence.
No, none at all.
Yeah, and yeah, those stories are pretty amazing, very stunning. And can you tell us about the DMT and the psychedelic experiences? Those are great too.
Yeah, sure. Here's a few more interesting experiences, people using salvia and DMT. There's many reports online from users of salvia who report encountering a wheel. One said, quote, I remembered I was on the outside of this reality, busy doing something, when unintentionally I got caught up in its path as it was rolling by. It feels as though I belong on the outside and I'm actually always there, but my gaze has been temporarily fixed in this reality and I can't escape its pull. I get a strong sense that I've accidentally went into this life/reality, and that seems to make me angry. As I feel I don't belong here, I know that I have to pretend to be a part of it and just wait until I die to get out. He went on to talk about a being that's rolling our reality. He says, quote, a gap suddenly opens up in the fabric reality, and I'm outside, which appears all white. I instantly remember that I've been here all along, and what feels like my real identity takes over. I begin to telepathically communicate with the being that appears to be overseeing this reality. I ask questions about the nature of this reality and life, etc., but I'm told I'm not allowed to know some things. The being tells him, quote, you're not a part of that reality. It's just a game God created for us to play. It's only temporary. You'll be out of it soon. God said we all have to play it. It's not real, but we still have to go through it. Just take part and play along. Don't worry, when you get out, everything's going to be all right, but you must live out your time. Here is someone on Reddit.
Do your time is just like being in jail.
Yeah, exactly. It's a life sentence, exactly. Here's someone on Reddit recalling their DMT experience. It's a quote, I feel as though I fall right out of my body 20 feet below the couch and bounce on the world's largest trampoline before being blasted straight out of the top of my head at 100,000 miles an hour through interstellar space into a brilliant tunnel of white light. The inside of the tunnel is miles wide, and the walls lined in 360 degrees with floating beings who are chanting, it's so good to see you. You are doing so well. We haven't seen you in so long. There are millions of them, and to me they appeared as bodhisattvas, or what some I believe would see as angels. I drop out on the other side of the tunnel and immediately remember, oh, this is the place in between lives. I think I've been here many, many times before. For what feels like trillions. Something shifts inside me and memories start to flood back to past lives. As I glance around, I'm floating through outer space. Then I notice two shape-shifting beings kind of bouncing around, little creatures, maybe 3 to 4 feet in height, but with no real defined figure. I ask them, "What do you do for work here?" They explain telepathically, "Well, we don't have to work because we don't have physical bodies to feed or house. This allows us time to work on spiritual development and pursue studying what is fun and interesting to us." At that moment, it cues me to look down at my own body. I'm nothing but translucent golden light, and I can see straight through myself. End quote. So this, this report should be all anyone needs to hear, not to want to reincarnate here anymore. I read an NDE reminiscent of this on nderf.org, NDERF.org. Wilson, he said, "I suddenly became aware of a very large object approaching slowly on a diagonal across this field. It was coming directly towards my car. Time was not functioning normally while this was happening. It was functioning at all. The object resembled a giant water wheel lying on its side and rotating as it approached me and my vehicle. As the object drew near to me, a kind of sensation came over my person, and I knew exactly what this thing was. Not only that, but I knew everything that pertained to it, what it was doing, what its business was with me, where and when I'd seen it before, why I was seeing it now, and many, many other things that I cannot now recall. I'd seen the object before I was born, and I will see it again when I die. We all knew it before we were born. We'll all see it when we die, but this information is eclipsed from us while we are alive, and that was why I was seeing it now in the experience, because I was in the process of dying in a fatal car crash. Here's what I can remember. This wheel wasn't something that moved towards me through the world or through reality somehow. That was an illusion that my senses were constructing for me. The wheel was reality itself. It represented every conceivable possibility for a life or for a world that could ever be envisioned or imagined. As it approached, I became aware that what we call our world was contained within it. It was simply one of the numberless slots or paddles in the water wheel. It had always been so. My life, your life, our world, all of us, we were part of this wheel structure, and we had always been a part of this structure. It simply now made itself visible to me. Then there became the truly terrifying dimension of experience. The water wheel sort of rolled across me and then across the place where my car was on the road. As it did so, I began to be hit by each of the paddles in the wheel. Remember, all this is just a way of talking. It doesn't really remotely describe the real situation as it actually was. But some sense of it can be had by imagining that in the space of each paddle, there's a kind of spinning film of water, like a waterfall on its side. Imagine a film of water being thrown outward from the wheel in each slot as if by centrifugal force. Imagine being slapped or splashed by each of these films as you collide with it and pass through to the next. This was happening. Except for these weren't just films of water, they were, for want of a better term, possible realities of what we might think of as the universe as a world. Again, our world, our entire universe as we normally think of it, was simply one among an infinite number of these. How did I know there was an infinite number? I just did. The kind of knowing came with the event, and there was no doubt of this knowing. It was so, and I knew it was so. He goes on, he says, the structure had some kind of cosmic purpose of sorting things into their correct natural place. I was afraid and resisted being sorted, so the wheel stepped up its aggressive attempts to sort me correctly. With this came another understanding that frightened me even more. I knew that unless I soon selected one of these realities to slide back into, that the wheel would coerce the situation by deciding for me. One way or another, I would be sorted whether I liked it or not. If I didn't choose for myself, I'd simply be fitted into place at some nearest position on the wheel to the point where I failed to make the decision, if that makes sense. I was aware of having a limited ability to choose, but not much. Even that limited ability wasn't much because each reality slammed against me and through me before I could make much sense of what it contained.
Yes, it's clearly a lack of free will and self-decision, basically making. Near-death experience reports are the key to understanding the illusion we live in and where we move to afterlife, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I really believe in near-death experiences are the key to understanding the afterlife. Talk to almost any near-death experiencer, and they will tell you they actually died. So they've seen and experienced at least some of what's on the other side. There are millions of people who've had near-death experiences. There are many commonalities in the experience, such as floating above the body, going through a tunnel to a white light, meeting a being of white light whom some call God, and having a life review. Not every experiencer encountered all these things. In fact, no two experiences are alike. But there's a definitive subjective nature to the NDEs. suggests that at some level the experiencer may be creating the experience with their consciousness. Near-death experiencers say the soul is a translucent liquid light and that they can travel anywhere instantaneously by thought, intent, or desire. They can manifest objects with their consciousness, but there is an element of illusion to it all. While most near-death experiencers seem to be along for the ride and not in control of the experience, there are several who are able to stop or even alter their experience. Mellon Thomas Benedict had an extensive NDE, and he said, "As I began to move toward the light, I knew intuitively that if I went to the light, I would be dead. So as I was moving toward the light, I said, 'Please, wait a minute. Hold on a second here. I want to think about this. I'd like to talk to you before I go.' To my surprise, the entire experience halted at that point. You're indeed in control of your near-death experience. You're not on a roller coaster ride, so my request was honored, and I had some conversations with the light. The light kept changing into different figures like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, mandalas, archetypal images, and signs. I asked the light, 'What's going on here? Please, light, clarify yourself for me. I really want to know what the reality of the situation.' I cannot really say the exact words because it's sort of telepathy. The light responded, 'The information transferred to me was that your beliefs shaped the kind of feedback you're getting before the light.'" End quote. Nancy D. wrote, "Immediately I was surrounded by an earthenwork tunnel in vivid, vibrant color and detail with the proverbial light at the end. Though the tunnel was just as real as anything I've experienced on Earth, I knew that I was not in a tunnel, for I wasn't fooled by its appearance. Upon realizing that I wasn't fooled, a flood of knowings about manifesting reality inundated my mind. I realized that we are all constantly manifest what we call physical reality just by virtue of our thoughts, and that the only reason we are fooled into believing it is real is because of the limitations of human senses. You can imagine how flabbergasted I was by this information and why I was not inclined to believe it. So I experimented with consciously manifesting some more to test the truth. I proved to myself that we do indeed have the ability to manifest what humans perceive to be physical reality by focusing our attention and intention on doing so." Another near-death experiencer, Jacob, wrote, "I observed my body as if I was floating above it. I then found myself at the edge of what seemed like a black amphitheater looking out across the universe. There was a vortex of white fire spiraling through space. It was a beautiful sight and looked very much like the electricity coming from a nuclear power generator. There were voices calling me to join this energy. Some voices were familiar, but most were not. I looked at the energy and said firmly, 'No, I want my own.' No sooner had I thought it, a very slim pillar of white fire appeared a distance from the large one. I said with satisfaction, 'That is mine.'" End quote. I found an interesting post on Reddit called "I Saw the White Light of Death." It says, quote, "I was projecting out of body and saw myself being pulled towards this huge and brilliant looking white light. As I came closer, I heard a voice say, 'You are passing over to the afterlife.' End quote. I am experienced being outside of the body, so I was able to stop and move away from the light. The light and voice stopped. At that point, I stopped moving forward, and the light and voice began again in the exact same fashion. I pulled back and repeated this scenario a few times. It is definitely a looping computer file. Most people are very confused at death, and it is a very impressive display that certainly tricks everyone, even though it is a computer simulated event."
Yeah, that's very important to point out the testimonies of a sort of artificial intelligence running the show here, basically the Truman Show.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's an amazing movie. There's so much symbolism within it. And here's another one. Matt S. said, "I saw a tube projecting up at about a 45-degree angle, much like a pipe in the ground. Above it, approximately 2 mouth diameters away, was 2 very bright white lights. These lights pivoted towards the target soul ascending the tunnel and paused for a few seconds while the soul entered the light. The light would then pivot like a searchlight towards another soul and pause again while the soul entered the light. Both lights were identical and moved similar, but independently. I knew that those were souls entering the light." And so Julian D. said, "It was a place, a domain that I knew right away was a transfer station, a place where beings go when moving between realms. It was like a city of crystal structures and verdant green trees and vegetation. I went into a huge beyond comprehension, perhaps dome-like structure where one would go to meet with enormous beings of light, energy, color to do the life review." Now keep in mind, I'm pointing out some of the more interesting near-death experiences that are on the edge. most near-death experiencers would tell you there's no trick involved and it's so beautiful and wonderful. I'm just trying to point out some of the anomalies.
Right, right. They fall easily for the screen memories, basically, presented to them.
Yeah, so I might be giving a little bit of a slanted picture, but these experiences are reported. Anyway, at the local Ions near-death support group, I met a near-death experiencer who met the demiurge and told me he was near the moon, and he also mentioned aliens. He didn't even know about my website or who I was or anything. There are some noticeable contradictions in the overall body of near-death reports. Some say Jesus had blue eyes, others brown. One said he had green eyes. Some say he had blonde hair, others white. One person said Jesus showed her the wounds in his hands, while another person said they learned Jesus did not die on the cross, and others said he did. Some say Jesus and God are the same being, while others said no. Some say there's no hell or evil, while others were shown hell and evil and say they know it exists. The vast majority say we judge ourselves, while others were clearly judged by God or a council of beings in courtrooms. One person said they knew or learned there's no reincarnation, while many others learned the multiple lives they've lived. Some say we've had free will, yet many were literally forced to come back to Earth against their will, or persuaded to come back after being shown family members that needed their help. Some were asked to do it as a favor, and they were told they were very special, or they're the only ones that could do it.
Yeah, some clear-cut contradictions, basically.
Yeah, there really are, which kind of makes it easy. I've been told that the near-death experiencers are given the experience that they need for their soul, to progress at that moment in time. But it could just as easily be, maybe the Archons are given the near-death experience that most exploits their vulnerabilities or weaknesses. You really know. Barbara G. said it was like being paroled from hell and then being forced to return. Geraldine said, it was not my choice. I was forced to go back. I did not want to. It was made by that main light source. Stephen R. said, it wasn't until years later, after I realized what happened to me had a name, near-death experience, and that what happened to me was real, not a dream, that I remembered then that they sent me back against my will. And I was really mad. Why did they make me come back when I wanted to stay? I felt controlled. Why did they ask me if the decision wasn't really mine? Oh, I was so mad. Of course, now I know why. My life on Earth wasn't finished yet. I had a lot to do, had a lot of learning to get, and I was to help others with this experience. Andrew P. said, the light has played a devious trick on me. The light allowed me to expand and become one with the universe, and then rammed me back into my frail earthly body. At the time, it seemed like a very cruel experience to put me through. I was very angry at the light. Francisca R. said, once again, on the flower meadow, I said that I would love so much to stay in heaven and asked if there wouldn't possibly exist a speedier process for me. Andreas promised to let me eventually decide myself. Of course, I knew that it was a trick. He'd only let me decide when it would be clear that I wanted to remain on Earth, but nevertheless, it comforted me. His experience involves going out into space. It was a friend of mine that I met at the meeting, I interviewed him, and he said his experience involves going out into space in a white cube of light, which he calls spaceship heaven. And the being of light asked him if he had learned enough about love. And he answered he'd never been married or had children. And boom, next thing he knows, he finds himself in line to go back to Earth. Right before he gets to Earth, wham, he's stopped by a serious being which he associates with the demiurge. Before he was allowed to come back, he had to make a bunch of contractual agreements consisting of if-then statements, which could result in anywhere from Plan A life, if everyone upheld their agreements with him, to a Plan Z life. This being was trying to show why his system was better than the life and was aiming to maintain a balance of 2/3 light and 1/3 darkness.
Wow, yeah, spiritual contracts or soul contracts are really mentioned a lot. Do they really apply those soul contracts to the humans that come back or incarnate on Earth?
Well, I mean, I don't really know the answer, I guess, to that, but the topic of soul contracts is a very important one, as it seems they need our consent, and we have to willingly agree to a contract before coming to Earth. At death, I mean, that is once our civil cord has been severed, our contract should no longer apply, and they will need to convince us to take on a new contract. They'll try to convince us that we need to learn more and that it's necessary. We may also be able to terminate any contracts we currently have, as they were formed under lies and deception, and thus null and void. Marie W. said, we had to go to the council meeting. They turned to me and told me that if I would agree to take on this new contract, I had to understand that I'd been dead a long time by Earth time, and had already ascended. They told me, I will suffer as any human woman who had by degree of traumatic death would suffer, but my healing would be greatly aided and accelerated through them if I would agree to the terms. Many discussions went around the council, the masters, then they turned to me, and ultimately I agreed. Rachel E. said, yes, life can only exist if there's death. Without death, there can be no life. So we enter a contract with God, and the terms and conditions include difficulties, challenges, and definite hardships. That is the experience we all signed up for. And Matt S. said, we ask to be born and we enter into a contract. We come to Earth with a purpose. On the other side, it's all that matters. Did we accomplish that mission or not? We are not judged by anyone, but we feel like a failure if we realize we did not accomplish the mission we incarnated for. Well, NDERF.org is a fantastic website. It's Near-Death Experiences Research Foundation, that stands for. And it contains a database of over 4,000 near-death experiences, and I found some startling ones. This soul was told they were the only ones that could do whatever it was that needed to be done. It says, why me? It said to me with a sad reply, you're the only one that I found strong enough to deal with this pain. You share the same feelings that I have felt, the feelings of loneliness, the feelings of being not noticed. That's why I've chosen you. From here on out, you will never forget this moment, and others will never realize the true meaning to life. Only you will understand life, and only you can hold my existence. End quote. Here's another person who was told that no one else could do what it needed to be done. Says, you have a mission to do on Earth, and you must do it. No one else can do it but you. I thought about it, and I said, okay, I'll do it. My mission is basically to share my story down here on the Earth, to tell everybody that they are loved too. Luca Rorindas, he said, he told me, I want you to go back on Earth. There is something I want you to do. After you will finish it, you will come back here in heaven and live here forever. I said, no, I want to stay here. He said, no, just go back. I said, no, I want to stay here. He spoke in a cool voice and convinced me to go back on Earth. And so,
you know what? When you talk about missions, it's true that a lot of suicidal attempts happen when the person he claims that she or he doesn't find his mission or her mission on Earth. So is that like a projection from the Archon and the false light onto the person's private objectives or goals in life? He has no definite goals or no mission. He hasn't found his mission. He tends to be suicidal sometimes. You think this is linked to the mission?
The last meeting I was at, I started noticing a lot of them say that they were off the path of their life, and so they had this near-death experience. And I even asked the leader, I said, is it possible that most near-death experiences, is it a commonality that when people are off their life's plan or their the mission, that they have that near-death experience to kind of put them back? And my friend that I interviewed, he said that the angels play us like video game characters, and that they try to keep us on track of our life plan. So it could very well be. Michael D. said, I didn't seem to fully understand what she was telling me, but I enjoyed the loving feeling she was giving me. She told me that I was very special. She told me that I had a very important task to fulfill in this life. And so SJ said, I found myself suddenly very high up in a bright white room. There were several beings there. There was a being on a throne that I almost directly in front of. That was the only one sitting down. I was forced on my hands and knees and couldn't move or look around except with my eyes. And I thought they were aliens. They were very white or chalky looking. At first, I believed from their color that they were possibly the gray aliens. But then I believed they were gods or religious type beings because of the setup of there being a throne in the room. The room was very bright white, and they were wearing robes. I don't necessarily view this being on the throne as the big G God, who I feel is probably a different sort of abstract and a more universal non-human consciousness. Howard P. said, boldly I came before the throne and started out by reminding God what a great life of love, worship, and sacrifice I had lived for him. When I had completed my request, I heard the real audible voice of God as God answered me. The tone of his anger knocked me on my face as God proceeded to tell me just what kind of life I had really lived. End quote. I mean, why would a light being that can take any form at once need to sit on a throne or even sit at all? I mean, does he get tired from standing too long? I mean, it seems a bit of a power trip. And why would God need to be worshipped? I mean, a throne is associated on earth with royalty and rulers or. So And Robert B., he said, this first being appeared to be the Virgin Mary. Only after asking, are you truly the Virgin Mary, it instantly manifested its true identity.
Yeah, I know. I've seen those testimonies in hypnotherapy sessions when the therapist asks the person to get close to the actual being, and it looks totally different from what he projects on the outside. So that's right. Kind of well. It's sort of a Game of Thrones there that you described. What is this light we're all supposed to see after death about? That's the big question.
Yeah, that is the big question, isn't it? I mean, we'll delve very deeply into that question in our next interview, which will concentrate solely on near-death experiences. But the light is described as being brighter than the sun. It's often said to be cloudy or misty. There's an overwhelming sense of interconnectedness and the most wonderful feeling of love and euphoria. Many, if not most, say the light being is God, and that it is a collective soul, all our souls combined. Some talk about being absorbed into the light or merging with it. Some say they felt they would lose their identity, yet others say it's like being a drop of water in the ocean. Many state all knowledge of the universe and wisdom is readily available there in a collective pool, but that we need to come to Earth to learn lessons and evolve. That really is the crux of the matter, whether we are sovereign individual spirits or whether we are part of a larger collective being which can send us on countless missions to Earth and other systems to learn and evolve. Here's a few NDEs about the light. August said, upon seeing the shimmering light that is indescribably beautiful, I had a revelation. This light is not in the strictest sense God in the traditional meaning of Bibles or various religions, including Christianity. This light, which is an energy just saw, is an aggregation of many multitudes of immortal souls from all walks of life. For example, plants, mammals, fish, and is collectively a life force. This light is a life force from which all life has originated. There's neither a single entity for each immortal soul as part of God, nor multiple entities for each immortal soul is but a part of the collective entity. Ross B. said, my granddad turns up and told me I had to go back. I said, no way in the world am I going back there. You got to be joking. Then two other blokes turned up and they had to sort of talk about it. Anyway, they kept asking me to go back. In the end, they said, there's something you got to do, but they wouldn't tell me what it was. I think they tricked me because as soon as I thought about going back, I was back. EDF said, but when I got to the round circle at the end of the tunnel where I would have entered into the light, I got a big surprise. Standing in a circle with legs apart and arms reaching out toward me was a very bright, multicolored figure, almost like a cartoon character and similar to the Joker on a deck of playing cards, but with a big smile that for some reason was more comforting and gentle than scary. He gently caught me in his arms and said to me, back to the womb, as he turned me around and gently tossed me back down the tunnel. Gunnar W. said, my whole soul or being was immersed in this love. He lifted me up and gave me a kiss on my mouth. This being of light loved me deeply, infinitely, deeply, and more intensively. I was happy. I could have stayed in this beam of love forever. Gradually, the loving became weaker, and I felt that something was wrong with me, something that made it very difficult for the light to continue with his love. He was trying not to tell me why. Finally, however, he was not able to keep it up any longer, and he quickly said, you have a smelly breath. You need a bath. Although I could not comprehend the reason, I was willing to do what the being of light wanted me to do. I was lifted up and put into a red light. After some time, however, I realized that I was tossed about rather rigorously. It was like being in a washing machine. I cried, I think that's enough. Immediately, I was lowered down and the love and warmth were switched off, but I still remained in this beam or sphere. Suddenly, the sun disappeared and I saw a moon. I was in a different world. Marta Y. said, the little that at this time I remember having understood included the following. Like all other beings, you are living in order to accomplish a mission, and you're not doing this. You must change your way of living. You're supposed to help many other beings, and you're not doing so. You have to stop eating meat, because no one who eats meat can remain here. This soul was told they were the only one that could do whatever it was that needed to be done. I think I already mentioned, I think I read that one. I'm sorry, I had it repeated. About the next one. Here's another person who was told that no one else could do it, what needed to be done. I asked them, I said, I'd like to stay. They said, maybe another time, but not now. You have a mission to do on the earth, and you must do it. No one else can do it but you. I thought about it and said, okay, I'll do it. Actually, I already mentioned all these. Somehow I got them duplicated. Sorry about that.
Yeah, what kind of trickery is used on us humans after life?
Well, sometimes flattery is used, and they're told that they're on a mission, and that we're the only ones that can do it. Also, they're told they have a very important mission. And Michael D said, "It didn't seem to fully understand what she was telling me, but I enjoyed the loving feeling she was giving me. I seem to be decoding and understanding what she told me more as time goes by. I'll try to put into words what she told me. She told me that I was very special. She told me that I had a very important task to fulfill in this life." Charles M., he said, "I observed him as he was so surely to hold on to the doorknob of this particular room door as he came out backwards, and noticed his countenance having what appeared to be on a long robe in which you could clearly look through him, and the gold belt he had on, plus looking at his face, which scared the living crap out of me. He had the face of a lion," end quote. Here's one account from Mary D., which was labeled as a spiritually transformative experience, but it had most of the same elements of an advanced NDE, the light, love, telepathic communication with the beings. She said she experienced immense love and saw a beam of light that came out of the sky and touched me on the shoulder. And she said, "One responding to my unasked question, 'Who are you?' was replied, 'God of Abraham.'" End quote. This man named Israel says that an angel named Lamdiel explained to him the evolution of our planet, and that this wonderful evolution means all humans are going to be bound within some super being, the being who is the hateful God of the Old Testament. He said, quote, "I was excited. Who is that giant spirit? I felt as if my heart were racing, although I was in my astral body. The angel smiled and slowly answered my question. It's going to be a strong, huge, high-intensity spirit from the third level of existence, from the forces level. That spirit is going to bond himself with all of humanity on the planet Earth. It will create a huge new entity, one that will improve your lives tremendously and forever. This huge spirit is quite well known in humanity on Earth. Many people, unknowingly, already are craving to bond with him. They consciously pray for his help and love him. In some part of their subconscious mind, all people on Earth already know it. And whether they believe in any established religion or not, in times of great need, most humans recognize his existence. They call him God, Elohim, Yahweh, Allah, the Heavenly Father, and many other names." End quote.
Right. It's all about cultural references, referrals, basically. Referral
Yeah,
gods, right?
it seems to be that. Who knows what these are archetypes or symbols that our consciousness somehow uses to make sense of the experience. We don't know how real it really is at that level. Another fascinating experience was reported by Gary, who saw lots of technology in the place he went to, and that when he saw the movie The Matrix, he had to get up and leave because it was so eerily reminiscent of his NDE. He writes, quote, "People should be studying NDEs and finding out why we're trapped in these inferior bodies." On his forum, he was asked the question, what could a national organization with an interest in NDE do about that? Would be of interest to you. He pleaded, "Find out what is happening." The near-death experiencer Paul said, "Religions teach of a false God that is not the true God of the afterlife, but probably a demonic entity in itself who they pose as the true God. This is not God. This is the description of fear and darkness. God is not a demanding, bloodthirsty, bipolar control freak bent on balancing some sin balance sheet. Talk about a tormenting trap. This is spiritual enslavement that forces one to live in an altered state of consciousness, as well as a spiritual cesspool of confusion."
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're being run by psychopaths, so and we live in a psychopathic environment.
Our leaders definitely are.
Yeah, but there are a lot in our close environment. At work or
Oh, yeah.
people around us. And are we living in a movie? You think?
I believe it could be called that, yeah, a cosmic play or a divine drama, the True Man Show. It has all the elements of a movie, the twisting plot, drama, lots of drama, especially conflict, which any scriptwriter will tell you is absolutely necessary. And it seems as if we're being watched. Brett B. had a series of NDEs while using ketamine, and each time he was able to see further into the experience until he was able to see through the illusion and realize he was sitting in a moving chair and part of a cinema or theater production being cheered on. He wrote, quote, "We exist somewhere in a system where humans have a purpose to produce energy. We are connected to a matrix computer to artificially create universes within our brains and therefore produce energy to power a system. People in this alternate universe are watching our life on Earth as we would watch a reality television show. I could see that we exist in many, many copies in many universes, but the origin of it all would be a great laboratory, somewhere in a mountain setting where humans would be sleeping in little boxes connected to a matrix kind of system to produce energy. End quote. The crux of the matter seems to be whether or not we really are a collective of oversouls or higher selves, or if the collective is trying to grow more powerful by seducing us sovereign beings into its field. I mean, isn't it telling that religious leaders describe their followers or congregation as a flock or a sheep? It's a herd mentality, and when the sheep come back after almost dying, they say, it's true, the grass really is greener on the other side. The NDEs say we're all one and we're all God, etc., and that we are collective soul, which has access to all knowledge and wisdom that we've learned while we come to Earth. And we come to Earth to learn, supposedly, so we all have access to the experience. But we have 7 billion souls on the planet. How many souls have there been in history? Billions and billions, if not trillions of souls. We've come here for thousands of years, and we still haven't learned enough about love yet, or whatever it is that we're supposed to learn. I propose the idea that pain and suffering, in order to pay back karmic debts or to learn lessons, is not a necessary evil, but just plain evil. Most prefer to believe a beautiful lie rather than face an ugly truth. I mean, how many lives does it take a collective to learn, especially a collective that's supposed to be God? And NDEs are very rarely ever told what their mission is. Similarly, here on Earth, love is only experienced as an emotion and the result of chemicals. There's a difference between what we think of as a romantic love and that which describes empathy, compassion, kindness, and mercy. Also, NDEs claim they know everything and have access to all knowledge while in the light, yet say we are here on Earth to learn. So why would we need to come to Earth to learn if the knowledge is so readily available there?
Yeah, especially if they don't remember anything from the greater knowledge realms. Can you please tell us about alien abductions and the similarities to NDEs?
There is a connection between near-death experiences and alien abductions. Abductions often include the experience of being taken up into a beam of light. The alien beings can appear as light and send feelings of love. I believe the aliens are astral-based and are able to shapeshift. The few dozen experiences on Ender where aliens were mentioned, including this one, Ruth said, I was taken to special entities who looked like the usual grays, but they had lots of wrinkles on their faces. They called themselves the Council and said they were part of a group called Soul Recyclers, helping souls to reincarnate. James N. said, I was taken to see a worm working controls of big cylinders that had every animal and people you could think of, and they were going down the cylinders from adults to babies. Fish also. I remember seeing all kinds of fish. As I was walking towards the worm, I heard a voice say, you go back and be a better man. I was told by many the light was the creator God and the worm was an angel giving rebirth. And so you have these shape-shifting Archons. A very interesting phenomenon is that at least a dozen or more said that the light being was able to shape-shift into any form it desired. They claim to do this in order to comfort the soul, but still could be construed on one level as being deceptive in nature. Andrew C. said, in an inquiry to me as to which religious symbolic form I wanted the presence to appear in. Few options, then my image of Jesus Christ in a blue robe appeared. Robert B. said, I saw the light approach. I was enveloped by the light and an entity that was prepared me for what I call my interview with the Supreme Being later in the light. This first being appeared to be the Virgin Mary. Only after asking, are you truly the Virgin Mary, it instantly manifests the true identity. I was nearly paralyzed with fear until again asking, please, what is happening? What's going on here? Kathy B. said, so the thoughts came into my head. What kind of form or shape would make you most comfortable? What do you mean? I thought back. Some required me to take the shape of a wise old man, others a woman, and still others an animal, all of different races, ages, sizes, or species. What about you? I thought without hesitation, human. With that, the light began to simultaneously separate into amazing rays of color and intensify into a more solid form. Once the light reached the stage where it looked like a human form, a rather generic-looking cookie-cutter shape, like a gingerbread man, I thought, that's enough. I'm comfortable with this form. Natalie S. said the personalities were non-physical in essence, taking on form if they intended to do that for a particular purpose. I perceived the way they looked according to what I preferred for my purpose.
Yes, they they take the form of the most comfortable person close to the abductees. Young children usually the ETs use the screen memories for taking form of their parents or family members, or even clowns, which give them the phobia of the clown later on when they grow up. I've heard of those stories quite a bit. So clowns are supposed to make little kids feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I have a quote about taking shape of the form of the clown, and I don't know if I included it in this.
Can you tell us about the screen memories and the physicality from those entities and beings from the other side?
Yeah, aliens have the ability to overlay a false screen memory in place of the memory of the abduction experience. So if the victim doesn't recall the incident accurately or at all in those cases, I mean, sometimes it's a deer or an owl. I've read like witnesses talk about that. Dr. Carla Turner wrote in Taken, she said, but intensive research shows that at the core of the human-alien interaction, there is a clear pattern of deception. We know, for instance, that screen memories are often used to mask an alien abduction. Such accounts abound, in which a person sees a familiar yet out-of-place animal like a deer or an owl, a monkey or a rabbit, and then experiences a period of missing time. The person often awakes later to find a new, unexplained scar on his body. Uneasiness about the encounter will persist, however, and far different memories may start to surface in dreams or flashbacks, and then the person seeks help to explain the uneasiness. Quite often, hypnotic regression is used to uncover the events behind the screen memory, and that is when a typical alien abduction surfaces. The most recent research in which I've been involved has turned up yet a second sort of screening process. But from different recent cases, it's apparent that these recovered memories may well be yet another screen, masking events that are much more reprehensible. And from David Jacobs' book, The Thread, he said, he mentioned in 1981, Bud Hopkins published Missing Time, a study in which he examined 7 abductees and found that a person could be taken many times during the course of his or her life and might have screen memories that mask other abduction events. He writes, third, to render memory recall more difficult, the aliens cloud what memory the abductee has by injecting confusing and false memories into his mind. For example, if the person is abducted from bed, he might remember an unusually vivid and realistic dream. Other abductions might produce screen memories of animals staring at the abductee, owls, deer, monkeys, raccoons. The abductee might think he saw an angel, a devil, or a deceased relative standing by his bed. Society provides a menu of explanations, and the abductees pick and choose depending upon their background and culture. Primary reason for the positive attitude is that most of these abductees have not undergone competent hypnosis to help them understand what has happened to them. They have only conscious recollections, which are often tainted with screen memories, false memories, fragmented memories, the remnants of imaging and envisioning procedures and wishful thinking. And Whitley Strieber wrote in Communion, I did not know that the owl and the light were screen memories that concealed a traumatic experience. As described by Freud, the screen memory is a method that the mind uses to shield itself from things too upsetting to recall. In her revealing book, Masquerade of Angels, Dr. Carla Turner wrote, many people feel that the alien contact is truly good, but they are programmed to the extent that they're unable to see anything else, no matter what actually took place. But very often I find there's another story underneath. And once you get past the screen, then you find out what really occurred. When people break past the screen and see the truth, they're usually in shock and terrified just as you were. And sometimes there are specific blocks installed at the same time that can appear to be many different things. In your case, you saw strange colors and extremely ugly, grotesque faces that frightened you. Once you realized they weren't real, that they were put there to disturb you and prevent you going further in your memories, you determined to get past them. During an interview with Art Bell, Professor David Jacobs said, one of the things we've discovered is that when people remember what happened to them straight out, and it's just a conscious memory without any hypnosis whatsoever, it's almost always totally wrong. What we find is that because this is a clandestine phenomenon and because people's memories are blocked neurologically, I mean, obviously there's no other way to do it. When they remember something straight out, they remember bits and pieces of things. And sometimes even those bits and pieces are distorted and they put them together into a seamless narrative. It becomes a concrete memory to them and they stake their life on it. I mean, I've had people tell me absolutely with fist and palm, this is what happened to me. I remember it like it yesterday, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then we'll investigate this case. the situation, the memory under hypnosis, and they begin to realize it didn't happen that way. And they'll say, I think I was wrong about that. This is not what I'm remembering. I'm remembering now something else, which is actually itself becomes more logical. And they can see the pieces that they had remembered and how it fits into a more complex story. But for sure, it becomes different. The problem then is that when people stake everything on their conscious memories, they might be a little bit on thin ice. I just advise people just to be real careful, because what you remember is one thing, but with competent hypnosis, it might not turn out to be exactly as you remembered it. And in fact, it might turn out to be a lot stranger, which it usually does.
It sort of reminds me of trauma-based mind control and ritual abuse, for the pedophile rings for children and stuff, for example, fragmenting the ego and
Sure.
and covering up by trauma, in ritual abuse, all their real memories, their true memories, actually.
Yeah, because the experiences are just too horrific for the consciousness to accept or handle. Stephen C. said, I didn't mention it before. These are near-death experiences. Stephen C. said, I didn't mention it before, but beings of the other side take a physical form so that our conscious minds can understand. Lonnie F. said, I was spoken to immediately and made aware of a presence. After we agreed that I had seen the physical form, he appeared. I think that having me make the decision to communicate with him, instead of him just appearing in front of me, was more for my comfort than anything else. And Hugo HSR said, they seek you as if they're a good spirit, but they're not, because when they arrive near you, they assume a shape that's frightening. Tunnel without end, and in the distance seems to be a blue light calling you for the good. But when you accept death, it controls you through your eyes. When you're near the tunnel, it becomes a sparkling red. Kiko M. said, I examined the ditch carefully. Then as I looked on the other side of the ditch, that's when shapes started to form. I saw these black creatures that could shapeshift from small to large and vice versa. I was aware that this was not a good place to be, like watching a stage play, but with real demonic creatures. And Robert B. said, I was told that I was there for 7 years, and that each person would only see what they could understand when they came to her. Some would see her as Jesus, some their fathers, their moms, every imaginable deity as well. And CS said, I believe that they appeared to me, or I perceived them, in a form that I would understand at the time. Now this example is not from Endurf, but it's from Howard Storm's book, My Descendant of Death. He said, we can appear to you in human form if you wish, or in any form you want, so you'll be comfortable with us. No, you're more beautiful than anything I've ever seen. And this last one is a non-NDE quote from Alien Resistance website. He says, although I never saw them as aliens, they did appear as monsters, clowns, friends, and even lovers. So when I heard about alien abductions, it wasn't hard for me to connect the dots, that if they can appear as clowns, an alien isn't that much different, end quote. In a 1998 Art Bell interview with John Lear, Art said, inevitably, in every warm and fuzzy life after death story, people rush towards the warm, inviting light. Down the tunnel, into the light. And once he said to me, John, don't go towards the light. It's a trick. Go to the darkness. John replied, now remember, I qualified that by saying that's what Whitley Strieber told. Right now, I'm going to the darkness. And later in the program, Art asked John, why the dark light? John said, because according to Whitley, if you go to the bright light, you have made a conscious choice of which direction to go, and supposedly, according to him, at that point, if you go to the white light, the Greys or whoever's in charge of this thing can decide what to do with you. Now, they can either send you back into another body, or they can put you into the black box, whereas if you go to the dark, you go right back into a terrestrial body, and you can continue on with whatever body you got into. I know John later said he would go to the light, as that's where all his friends will be.
The Greys play a big part in the afterlife process for humans, right? Well, it seems to be that way in all your witnesses or testimonies.
Well, the Greys have been seen by at least a dozen near-death experiences, but keep in mind the beings can most likely take any form they desire. Val Valerian in his Matrix book series writes, it is they, the Grey aliens, who await in the light when the human being dies. The human being is then recycled into another body, and the process begins all over again, hence the light and tunnel death trap. Scanning someone they wish to recycle as they near death, the aliens discover who the person was close to has died. They project the person's image into the white light tunnel, and the image waves you in deeper. If you choose to follow, you can be trapped and sent to another incarnation of their choice. These entities view Earth as a big farm. Linda Moulton Howe, another researcher, said, if praying mantis aliens claim to be in charge of our spiritual evolutions. He stated, if the recycling of souls is the machinery in this universe, one could argue philosophically that entropy in this universe is designed so that there would be a recycling of souls to grow, and strengthen, and evolve. A year after writing her book, Masquerade of Angels, the phenomenal abduction researcher, Dr. Carla Turner, in her last public lecture on the alien abductor, stated, quote, the entities deliberately deceive us in their interactions with us. This is the number one fact that has emerged from our research into this field. If I'm able to leave you with only one message, that we are being deceived in many ways by these interactions, then I will be happy with my work today. He said, aliens show a mysterious interest in the human soul. The young girl whom the aliens asked if they could borrow her soul, two different abductees, totally isolated from each other. They happen both come from the St. Louis area, both shown at the age of 5 with gigantic metallic spherical objects somewhere in space. We're told in essence it was the soul recycling center. A man who watched as his young body was killed and his soul energy released, captured in a container and taken to a new replacement body, where it was reintroduced to the body through the technology of the little black box you might have heard about in some of these cases. So,
I think that most humans cannot admit or even acknowledge or think of a soul recycling machinery. You know why? Because of their ego. It doesn't flatter their ego.
That's right.
And this is it, basically.
Yeah, it's like I was saying, we'd rather believe in a beautiful lie than another truth. During a 1994 Parents Smart Bell's Post AM radio show, she speculated on the nature of the alien's purpose for interacting with humans, and she said, quote, my best opinion is that is some form, metaphorically speaking, of farming, that we have some source for something, qualities of physical materials, or energetic energy patterns, I have no idea. We might find that they could be considered more correctly, perhaps, interloping farmers, in the way that we as a species has taken over wild animals time and again and domesticated them and genetically altered them for our benefit.
Well, they're invisible farmers to most of the masses out there that are not awoken to these topics, actually, or haven't experienced the same things. If aliens are appearing as light, are light beings another deception?
Well, we are all light beings technically, since our spirit is translucent liquid light, but some of the light beings can take an alien form or even a religious form, whatever makes you feel comfortable. So sometimes the soul is given a choice as to what form one wishes them to appear as. So in some cases, it could be surmised that there is a deception involved, since they're not always taking their original form, if they even have one at all. In hypnotist Edith Fiore's book Encounters, one of her case studies, Sherry, was taken up into a craft in a beam of light, and under hypnosis, she said, quote, it seems like I see a flash of light. I feel this pulsating, pulling kind of sensation. It seems like there's some kind of form that seems to be mostly light. I feel kind of frightened. It's pretty scary. One thing I do see is that the eyes are very caring and loving. The face I saw was gone. It was more amphibian than anything else. I feel like it's like light, some kind of light that's making me calm. It's calming. It seems to be emanating from whoever's around me. I just get feelings of love. It seems like they only want me to remember them as light. So this is from an abduction account of Betty and Drew Luca from Raymond Fowler's book, The Watchers. And she says, oh, we're running towards the light now. Oh, I can see the elder is changing to a white light being, and the gray is changing into a light blue one as we're running closer to the light. Oh, I'm starting to change into a golden colored light. Oh, this is beautiful. Oh, this is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. There's such love. There's such peace. I'm just engulfed in light and blending into that light. Oh, it's just so fantastically beautiful. It's just so much love, so much peace, and so wonderful, end quote. Those Watchers, too. I'm sorry to go to that one. In Edith Fiore's book, Encounters, one case involved a client who was an abductee. She was told by the aliens who called themselves the planners. They said, quote, eat foods with the highest vibration on your planet, and you must talk to us. Talk to those of the light. That's who we are. And when you feel the light, you will get your nourishment. Bathe in the light. That is the force of love. The more we pray in the light, this accelerates our vibration. They say that the animals are also a part of this. We are to the animals as they are to us. They're in our care. And if we can love those things that we are evolving toward the light, that will enable the love to come to us more as well. I remember asking if the light had to do with the earth, and it was the universal light. In other words, there seemed to be one light for everybody, and even the extraterrestrials. End quote. Raymond Fowler in his book Watchers 2, Exploring UFOs and the Near-Death Experience. In this chapter, he compares Betty's UFO experience with those of the near-death experiences by including sections on the presence of OBEs, approaching the light, greetings by a loving being, meeting robed entities, encountering beings of light, turning into light, communicating by telepathy, returning to home, encountering timelessness, wishing to remain in the light, and understanding love and raising environmental awareness. Another book which explores the connection between UFOs and NDEs is The Omega Project, Near-Death Experiences, UFO Encounters, and Mind at Large by Kenneth Ring, PhD. He writes about one of his cases, quote, "What on earth or in heaven do we have here? Is this an NDE or some kind of UFO encounter? Clearly it has elements of both. It's not the only instance in my files. Among my respondents, I found others who, in describing what purported to be an NDE, began to talk about UFOs and aliens in the same context. Could it be that the world of the NDE and that of the UFO abduction, for all their differences, are not, after all, universes apart, but a part of the same universe? Could it be that NDEers and UFO experiences have more in common with one another than we've heretofore suspected?" End quote.
It seems that way, actually. Who is that person called Truman Cash? It's a pseudonym, I believe.
Yeah, Truman Cash is an abductee who had an experience with the white light tunnel and alien beings. He wrote, "After I was thoroughly inculcated in this white light amnesia room, two insectoids approached me and told me that I was ready to begin my new life. I saw that foggy light. I hear a voice say, 'Go to the light,' and I go to the light. The phrase, 'go to the light,' is an implant station. Okay, I'm going into a big, huge sphere space station. I'm going through a tunnel of light. The end of the tunnel is this room, and a body with intense light and power that just presses and pushes on me, forces me into this body. I can feel the body now as the force field pushes me in. They tricked me. They put me in a capsule and shoot it out to a planet. This light goes to this implant station that's just huge. Reminds me of a small planet or moon. Don't go to the light. I was right about that. The New Age light, it's part of the trap. I can see why people are drawn to it. It's like taking a vacation, milling around in the white light. There's no pain there. You're being programmed to be a sheep. You aren't exposed to stuff. There are other parts of the ship where you're rammed in the bodies with force beams. It's like a soul-sucking tractor beam. It just sucks you in. At first, I thought they were light beams. These are the praying mantis guys. They take me into the white, misty light. I'm being programmed to always return to the light. I can see why people think going to the light is good because it feels good. You feel like you're really loved and you're really special. Their programming is very sweet, but very insincere and phony. It appears that electromagnetics plays a key role in this procedure. I suddenly realized that they were using the nervous system of the body, including the brain, of course, to implant beings in the bodies. The nerves transmit electrical charges, which creates the electromagnetic field around the body. And the chakras are simply nerve networks which create electromagnetic fields.
Right, right. There's another strange phenomenon involving astral entities. Is the one? It's a very important part of encounters. Shadow beings, right? Or shadow people. Who are they?
Well, shadow beings are seen in some near-death experiences as are hooded beings. Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of stories involve shadow beings. It can be read on websites like yourghoststories.com. There are over 24 accounts of NDEs involving shadow beings on Earth, and they're often seen leaning over a bed, whispering to a sleeping person. The television show Paranormal Witness did an episode on hospital hauntings and the Angel of Death, also known as the Grim Reaper. One hospice worker on the show said, "Every nurse has a story I know that I saw the Angel of Death in front of me. I'll swear on a stack of Bibles. We keep this stuff to ourselves because we're risking a lot. People aren't going to pick a hospital where people are talking about seeing all kinds of weird things happening." Also, someone asked the nurses at allnurses.com, "Share your nursing ghost stories. I know you've seen and heard freaky things." And the thread contained 198 pages worth of stories. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung wrote about archetypes, including what he called the shadow archetype. "I do think we need to acknowledge the shadow beings and accept them as part of our reality. We should also take ownership that we, as perhaps the collective Sophia, contribute to their reality and need to transmute the shadow into light.
Into real light this time.
Right.
What conclusions can you draw from out-of-body experiences?
Well, I can share some of the conclusions out-of-body researcher William Gilman has come to. He's had many out-of-body experiences himself, I think like 100 or something. Conducted a survey of over 16,000 people who experienced astral travel. And he wrote, "It's important to learn how to consciously move and lock your awareness within any individual energy environment. You unknowingly did this when you entered the first non-physical reality immediately after your death. When you embraced this construct and accepted it as your own, you became one with it. In doing so, you unconsciously locked yourself in a structured, consensus thought matrix created by a group of like-minded souls." He says, to become an effective spiritual traveler, you must learn how to shift your state of awareness without becoming attached to the energies that dominate a given reality. The key is to completely focus, know, and flow. It's essential to lock your awareness into a specific energy environment or your perception will become unstable. This skill is critical when you're attempting multiple reality jumps. He writes, yes, all these things are your projections. Now you can see how easy it is for untrained souls to become completely trapped within their own thought forms. This is a common problem for billions of souls dwelling in the physical and astral projections. Few souls are aware of the creative power of their own thoughts. The self-created manifestations of forms makes for convincing illusions in all dimensions. Many humans remain imprisoned in this labyrinth of the mind. He says, many people are relieved and overjoyed to discover that they really do continue to exist after death, and as a result, gladly accept the first non-physical reality they experience as their new spiritual home. However, there's one very serious problem with this comforting scenario that few are aware of and no one addresses. You have just accepted and adapted to a thought consensus environment on the astral plane. You've just accepted a reflection of spirit instead of the true essence of it. You've done what billions have done before you. You've merged your consciousness with a non-physical reality far from your true spiritual home. By doing so, you essentially guarantee the continuation of your form-based existence and your incarnation. Said, I'm often asked what I will do when I take my final breath. My answer is this: I will demand to experience my higher self, my spiritual essence. I'm not content to simply go to the light. I'm not content to accept past acquaintances and comfortable surroundings as my new reality. In fact, I'm not content to settle for any form-based reality as my spiritual home. I absolutely know there is so much more available beyond the realms of form. There exist dimensions of magnificent living light simply waiting for us. All we need to do is awaken and accept their reality. Two powerful truths are apparent. First, all form is but a reflection of pure spirit. Second, we are not helpless victims of an external force that dictates or directs our reality in our lives. We are bestowed with the power of free will and the ability to take spiritual action. Why would you settle for a pale reflection of reality when the pure realms of spirit are always present? He says, our spiritual growth and evolution are directly related to our ability to navigate the multidimensional path within us. We must conquer our personal addictions and attachments, for these are the anchors that hold us to the destiny of form and matter. Quote.
But how is waking up possible if we're artificially dumbed down all the time by those poisons and frequencies and
very difficult. It took me years. You know, it is possible to wake up and become aware that we're living in a matrix or a false construct, and many people are doing just that. However, the true superconsciousness of our soul is being artificially held down and regulated by the brain. There's a governor or regulator in our brain which keeps the frequency from going higher, keeps it in a feedback loop, and helps to keep us dumbed down and asleep. Ultimately, waking up is the first step to exiting the matrix. After all, one has to be aware they are free or they will remain a prisoner to their own ignorance. The importance of frequency with respect to consciousness can be seen when we go to sleep at night. I mean, the average person probably has several dreams every night, but then whenever we decide we've had enough dreams or slept enough, or the alarm rings, and we decide we have to go to work, we wake up or raise our consciousness to where we are aware or conscious. We dream at night, and then we wake up to a more real reality. It's interesting that the word wake as a verb means to rouse from lethargy, apathy, or ignorance. and as a noun also describes a ceremony for presiding over a dead person. It's even more interesting that the word wake are waves left behind by a vehicle traveling through water or a medium. Or in this scenario, the waves are waves of consciousness, and the vehicle is the soul or spirit, and the medium is the astral realm. So whenever we've decided that we are through living enough lives or dreams, we can decide to wake up and go to a higher level of consciousness, a more real or true reality. By raising the frequency of the waves our soul leaves as it travels through the astral or etheric medium. To raise the frequency is really to shorten the wavelengths, or to actually not move outward at all, but to move back inward to our source.
Right. So the key is basically to wake up or become awake and aware of another reality or not. Basically, that's the question. And what are the solutions for exiting the matrix, according to you?
Well, it's all about frequency and intent. And I received an email about a week ago from a woman. She wrote, "I'm very engaged in reading your article on the white light trap. I've been reviewing your article on and off for the past year. It changed my perspective on the afterlife immensely. Last year, I had a serious accident. I was in and out of a coma for days, having spent 2 weeks in the intensive care unit. One thing I do remember is when I lost consciousness, plunging into total darkness. No bright light, no deceased family members. As the months passed by, a feeling of absolute love and peace would resonate from within me. Still does. Strangers seem to be curious about me. At night, as I'm drifting to sleep, internally, my head will start to glow." I asked her more, and she said, "I'd read your article months before my accident, and so in essence, it stayed with me. As I'm lying on my hospital bed, I had momentary lucid thoughts, which were not to project any expectations of angels, guides, etc. I was not going to be lied to, which is why I'm guessing the immersion into the void. Once I started to regain lucidity, one of the nurses confessed to me that she'd often come into my room when I was unconscious because she said the room would fill with a feeling of peacefulness. The woman then went out of her way to take such loving care of me. At times, this divine love within me is so intense, I sometimes burst into tears. My happiest moments are spent in solitude, at peace." End quote. If near-death experiences are correct, then when we die, we could potentially create our own reality and travel by thought or intent. And unfortunately, other entities may try to usurp our sovereignty or free will and trick us into doing their will and willingly give them our energy. One could decide to go to darkness or void and stop relying on external sources and rely on one's own inner light to manifest reality. This could be disastrous if one's thoughts and desires are not pure. I mean, one could potentially become another demiurge. The worst case scenario is going back to the loving light and get another shot at making your life better. One can negotiate to go to a better planet. Many of the listeners of your show, however, probably reached the point where they are not easily amused with all the shiny, glittery objects here anymore and are ready to return to the true source. My friend who had an NDE and met the demiurge said, eventually the demiurge gives up and there's thousands of years on paradise on Earth, so he could refuse to reincarnate till that time, and if we refuse to go to the light or at least reincarnate there are no souls to power their system. If you're tired of the unending drama that a life on Earth in a physical body presents, then you can dissolve your attachments and ties to this world. To do this, it may be necessary to learn not to judge others or hold grudges or anger towards others, and to practice forgiveness. To do this, it might be helpful for one to renounce the world and all its physical nerves so as to break our addiction to the human experience.
Right. And basically, is the detachment from our avatar inside the game is crucial, right?
Very crucial, yeah. Attachment to this Earth game can hold us back from leaving. We're like junkies. One must be very careful to not fall to the trap of agreeing to come back to Earth to save the world as a hero or a savior figure. I mean, for you to agree to come here to be a hero requires a great number of souls to agree to come here in need of being saved and must suffer, just so that we can be a savior or hero. One must be content with leaving this world behind forever, knowing there are higher realms which are far better, where there's no suffering. Each soul must come to that realization on their own in due time. There are higher planes and should not be content with going to the first external light we see. Melvin Thomas Benedict went to a light beyond the first light, and an NDE named David went through 7 planes, where each light was 1,000,000 times brighter than the previous one. During ascension, one will likely go through what may seem like a series of wormholes, as there are multiple planes of dimension. No pun intended, but one must have tunnel vision and ignore any enticing or frightening distractions that are just manipulated illusions or projections. consciousness is a projector which the Archons can hack. Yeah, we're temporarily trapped here on Earth by electromagnetic prison, but at death it's a matter of redirecting our attention back inwards toward our true divine light source within, which is back at the eternal light realm. It's analogous to a rubber band being extended or stretched outward, but then snapping back to its original natural resting position, or a balloon being held underwater. As this happens, we'll probably feel like shooting through a wormhole or tunnel because the vibrations are getting shorter and shorter, faster and faster from the outside to a shorter radius. We're everywhere at once. It's simply an issue where we choose to focus our attention. We can focus on the illusions and projections of the Archon shadow beings and the denser, darker physical plane, or we can ignore the illusions and focus our attention on our true divine light, which is at the eternal light realm. There's an emotional plane, a mental plane, a plane where we can exist as a point of consciousness, maybe even planes above that where we can exist as pure energy or awareness beyond the need for thought. If one's ready to move on and leave all the drama of the lower planes behind, and here's the solution I prefer, right? I agree with what Tesla said, and I believe the universe is composed of frequency. In my opinion, one needs to leave the physical and astral planes behind completely. So my suggestion at death is one can raise the vibrational level of frequency of the spirit, which is light. The key seems to be that energy flows where attention goes, so keep focusing your consciousness and intention on increasing your frequency back to the center. Just keep increasing the vibration of your soul as much as you possibly can by using your focused, willful intent. Could use a sort of mantra at death. Higher frequency now, higher frequency now, move inward. Just keep increasing your soul's vibrational frequency until you arrive at the highest frequency, which may manifest as the purest light, the absolute truth, the unconditional love.
Right. Yeah. So basically, the key is a higher frequency and intent.
Exactly.
Let's wrap up with what life down here is all about. Are there any freedom or liberation moves that can take us closer to home, which is the true source?
Yeah, I know life's hard for many of you listening. You just try to keep in mind that it's only a temporary situation. Life can at times seem to take forever, but one day we'll take our last breath and die. So each day we're one day closer to freedom and liberation and going home. It's important to be ready for that day. Practice inner silence to keep the entities at bay. Keep raising your frequency as high as possible. It's important to practice spiritual alchemy to keep attachments and residue from weighing our souls down. Practice love and kindness. Be loving, gentle, peacemaker, merciful, and compassionate. Minister to the poor and sick and afflicted. Renounce all things of the world. We should be in the world but not of the world. Just keep your frequency as high as possible. Think positively and avoid negative thinking. Meditate daily upon ascension to keep your focus and intent sharp so that it will be kind of automatic. I'd really like to hear from people about their experiences, whether they believe we're learning and growing here through suffering, or whether they believe that God is evolving, whether or not our souls are sovereign. My email address is wayneJbush@gmail.com. That's WAYNE, the letter J, BUSH@gmail.com. No relation, by the way. Thanks for having me on your show, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you so much, Wayne. It's really fascinating, and I hope it was a big eye opener. This first interview with you, because there's going to be another one. The next one is going to be about about more NDEs, near-death experiencer stories, and you'll be quoting quite a few of them, and to back up this game of lies in our divine dramatic life, which may be a dream, by the way. So it's going to be great and exciting, and it was great and exciting tonight. We really extend our big thanks to you and your work, because your website is really rich and very detailed, and contains a lot of information to basically complete what you've said tonight. And thank you so much for that. And
thanks. I can't wait to do the next interview. It's going to be great. Good night. Sleep tight, and don't let the Archons fight.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Well, it's going to be real soon. So we'll see you again soon with Wayne, and thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. And please don't hesitate to send him some questions. Thank you, Wayne.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Positive thoughts and higher frequency until we get home.
And good intents. Bye-bye.
Yeah, good night.
Cheers.